Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, Yakutia, Russia, where winter doesn't just arrive, it conquers. Picture this. You step outside and your breath doesn't just fog, it crystallizes into tiny ice needles that tinkle as they fall. The air is so cold it feels solid, like you're breathing shards of glass. Your nostrils seal shut with frost on your first inhale. Metal touches skin and they bond instantly, freezing together in a kiss you'll regret. This is minus 71 degrees Celsius, cold enough that the laws of normal life simply stop applying. You probably won't survive this without learning tricks that sound absolutely insane to anyone living in a sensible climate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how this little community spans the globe. Someone's having morning coffee in Sydney, while someone else in Sao Paulo is winding down their Saturday night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're arriving in Yakutsk, the capital of the Sakha Republic, in January. Not exactly prime tourist season. The plane descends through darkness because in deep winter here, the sun makes only a brief, apologetic appearance around midday, like a friend who shows up to a party just to say they technically came. It's 2 p.m. and the sky is already deepening to purple-black. Through the small airplane window, you see lights scattered across an endless white void. No gentle landing here. The plane hits the runway hard because the tires have been specially formulated to not shatter like glass in the cold. And even then, the pilots aren't taking chances with a delicate touchdown. The moment the cabin door opens, you understand that you've made a terrible mistake. Every YouTube video, every documentary, every well-meaning warning. None of it prepared you for this. The cold doesn't creep or seep. It attacks. It's a physical force that slams into you, reaching through your Arctic-rated jacket like it's made of tissue paper. Your first breath in Yakutian winter air is an experience you'll never forget, and will spend the rest of your time here trying not to repeat too often. The moisture in your nose freezes instantly. You can hear it. A tiny crackling sound as the delicate hairs inside your nostrils become brittle ice sculptures. You descend the stairs carefully because the metal railing is a trap. Touch it with bare skin and you're leaving that skin behind. Every local knows this. The children know this. Even the stray dogs know this. But you, fresh off a plane from wherever you came from, where minus 10 degrees Celsius is considered brutally cold, you don't quite believe it yet. You keep your gloved hand on the railing, and even through 2 layers of insulation, you can feel the cold radiating like negative heat, an absence so profound it feels like presence. The walk across the tarmac to the terminal is perhaps 50 meters. You'll remember it as the longest 50 meters of your life. Your face, the only exposed skin because you're not completely foolish, begins to hurt immediately. Not the tingly, oh it's chilly hurt. This is a deep, aching pain like someone's pressing frozen stones against your cheekbones. Your eyes water reflexively, and those tears freeze on your lashes. You blink and feel them crack. It's bizarrely fascinating and absolutely terrifying in equal measure. Inside the terminal, the warmth hits you like a wall, and suddenly you're sweating inside your Arctic gear, peeling off layers while your glasses fog so completely you're effectively blind. Welcome to Yakutia, where you're either freezing or boiling, rarely anything in between. The locals move through this transition seamlessly, perfectly calibrated to the temperature violence of their home. They're wearing what looks like normal winter clothing, heavy, yes, but not the ridiculous marshmallow suits you saw recommended online. You feel immediately overdressed and underprepared simultaneously. Your host, Sardana, is a middle-aged Yakut woman with a face that's seen 60 winters, but holds the kind of stern kindness that comes from living somewhere that kills careless people. She looks at your gear with barely concealed amusement. "You bought this in Moscow?" she asks in accented but perfect Russian. You nod. She sighs. "Moscow people think they know cold. They know nothing. Come, we fix you up properly." The drive into Yakutsk proper is otherworldly. It's now around 3 p.m. and fully dark. The city glows against the snow, but it's not a romantic glow. It's the determined, defiant light of human habitation clinging to a place that doesn't want it. The buildings are strange, elevated on stilts like they're wading through the snow. Sardana notices you staring. Permafrost, she explains. Ground is frozen solid all year, meters deep. If we build on it directly, the heat from buildings melts the ground beneath and everything sinks, collapses. So we build on stilts, let the cold air circulate underneath. This way, the permafrost stays frozen and we stay level. It's a perfect example of something you'll learn over and over here. In Yakutia, you don't fight the cold. You can't. It's too big, too absolute. Instead, you negotiate with it. You find clever ways to exist alongside something that wants you dead. The stilted buildings aren't a victory over winter. They're a treaty with it. Historians still argue whether Yakutia's indigenous peoples originally settled here or were pushed north by other groups. But regardless of how they arrived, the Saka people have been thriving in this region for thousands of years. They developed horse and cattle breeding in conditions where you'd think large mammals would simply give up and die. Their traditional knowledge of surviving extreme cold is so sophisticated that Russian scientists spent decades studying Yakut practices, trying to reverse engineer the wisdom into modern survival manuals. The car's heater is blasting, but Sardana keeps the windows cracked. Otherwise, too much moisture inside, she says. Freezes on the inside of the windows. Can't see anything. Everything here is a calculation. Every comfort has a cost. Warmth creates moisture. Moisture becomes ice. Ice blocks your view or seals your door shut or weighs down power lines until they snap. You're beginning to understand that surviving here is a full-time job that never clocks out. You pass a man walking his dog, an enormous furry thing that looks like a wolf had a baby with a bear. The man is dressed heavily but moving at a normal pace, utterly unbothered. His dog trots happily beside him, tongue lolling out, breath creating a small personal fog bank around its head. Yakushin Laika, Sardana says, following your gaze. These dogs pull sleds at minus 50 degrees Celsius and think it's a nice day. Your fancy European dogs would die in an hour out here. She's not exaggerating for effect. She's stating a simple fact. The casual way she discusses death, from cold, from carelessness, from being unprepared, will become familiar. People here have a relationship with mortality that's more honest than most places. When your environment can kill you in 20 minutes of exposure, you don't romanticize danger. You respect it, prepare for it, and talk about it plainly. The apartment building Sardana brings you to is Soviet era, built with the kind of brutal functionality that defines most of Yakutsk's architecture. Inside, the hallway is warm enough that you immediately start sweating again. We keep buildings very hot inside, she explains. Temperature outside and inside might differ by 100 degrees or more. Your body doesn't know what to do with this, so you get sick easily if you're not careful. Drink water, lots of water. The air inside is so dry it pulls moisture from you like a sponge. Her apartment is on the 5th floor, cozy and cluttered in the way of homes where people actually live, as opposed to the sterile showrooms of Instagram influencers. The windows are triple-paned, thick enough that you could probably stop a bullet with them, and still, ice is forming in the corners where the cold finds its way through microscopic gaps. This is normal, Sardana says, catching you staring. In deep winter, we accept some ice inside. Fighting it completely is impossible. We scrape the worst off and live with the rest. She shows you to a small room that will be yours for the next month. There's a bed piled with blankets, a desk, and a window that looks out onto the dark city. Tonight, just rest and adjust, she says. Tomorrow, I teach you how to not die. She says this with a completely straight face, and you realize she's not joking even a little bit. This is orientation. This is survival school. This is the difference between being a tourist who has an adventure to talk about and being a statistic that locals shake their heads over. After she leaves, you stand at the window looking out at Yakutsk. Smoke rises from countless chimneys, not drifting lazily but shooting straight up in columns before the cold freezes it into strange cloud formations. The streetlights create halos in the ice crystal air. A few cars move slowly through the streets, their headlights looking weak and apologetic against the overwhelming dark and cold. Somewhere out there, people are walking to work, to shops, to visit friends. Children are playing. Life is happening at minus 71 degrees Celsius. You think about the ash technique Sardana mentioned briefly at the airport, stuffing warm ash into your boots to keep your feet from freezing. It sounded insane then. Looking out at this frozen world, you're starting to think it might be the sanest thing you've heard all day. Your feet are warm now in this overheated apartment, but you remember the walk across the tarmac. You remember how quickly the cold found its way through your expensive boots. You imagine spending hours outside, walking, working, living. Your toes curl involuntarily at the thought. This is Yakutia. This is home to nearly 1 million people who have decided that extreme cold is just weather, that minus 71 degrees Celsius is survivable with the right knowledge, that human beings can thrive anywhere if they're stubborn enough and smart enough. Over the next month, you're going to learn their secrets. You're going to discover why ash in your boots isn't crazy. It's brilliant. You're going to understand the difference between surviving and living in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. But tonight, you're just grateful for the pile of blankets on your bed and the radiator that's pumping out heat like it's personally offended by the winter outside. You crawl under the covers fully clothed because Sardana warned you that sometimes, in deep winter, the heating fails. When that happens, she said cheerfully, we all sleep in our clothes and hope it comes back before morning. You fall asleep to the sound of the building creaking and groaning as metal and concrete contract in the cold. The entire structure shifting and settling like a living thing negotiating with the frozen ground beneath it. It sounds ominous. It sounds like the building is barely holding together. Sardana assures you this is normal. Everything here that sounds like imminent disaster is apparently just Tuesday in Yakutsk. Welcome to Yakutia. Try not to freeze to death. Morning arrives with all the enthusiasm of a teenager on a Monday, which is to say, barely. You wake around 9 a.m. to find the world outside your window still locked in darkness, with just the faintest suggestion of purple on the eastern horizon. Like the sun is considering showing up but hasn't committed yet. The thermometer mounted outside Sardana's kitchen window reads minus 68 degrees Celsius. You stare at those numbers, waiting for them to make sense. They don't. Your brain simply refuses to process that temperature as something occurring in a place where humans live. Sardana is already up, making tea in a kitchen that smells like yesterday's fish soup and this morning's black bread. She sees you staring at the thermometer and chuckles. Not so bad today, she says. Last week we had minus 73 degrees Celsius. That's when the schools close. You do the math in your head. Schools remain open at minus 68 degrees Celsius. Children walk to school in cold that would kill an unprepared adult in the time it takes to watch a TV episode. The casual extremity of this place is going to take some getting used to. Today, you learn what happens to your body in real cold. Sardana announces, pouring you tea so strong and sweet it could probably be used as antifreeze. Not the scientific words, the feeling. How to recognize when you're in danger before your brain stops working well enough to recognize anything. This is the Yakutian approach to education. Practical, direct, and focused on not dying. You appreciate the clarity. But first, the science, because understanding what's happening inside your body makes the survival techniques make sense. When you step outside into minus 70 degrees Celsius air, your body immediately goes into crisis mode. Every system you have prioritizes one single goal: keep the core warm. Your brain, your heart, your vital organs, these must stay at roughly 37 degrees Celsius or you die. Everything else is negotiable. Your fingers, your toes, your nose, your ears, these are acceptable losses in your body's desperate mathematics of survival. The moment that cold air hits you, the blood vessels in your extremities constrict. This is called vasoconstriction, and it's your body's first line of defense. By narrowing these vessels, your body reduces blood flow to your skin and limbs, keeping that warm blood circulating around your core instead. It's a good strategy for short-term exposure. It's a terrible strategy for spending hours outside, because those constricted vessels mean your fingers and toes are now receiving barely any warm blood. Frostbite begins its slow, creeping conquest. Your metabolism ramps up immediately, trying to generate more heat. You start shivering, not the gentle tremble of a mild chill, but violent, uncontrollable shaking as your muscles rapidly contract and release, burning energy to produce warmth. Shivering can increase your heat production by up to 5 times your resting metabolic rate. It's effective but exhausting. Your body is essentially running a marathon while standing still, burning through your energy reserves at an alarming rate. This is why Yakutians eat what seems like an impossible amount of food, especially fat. They're not being greedy, they're fueling the furnace. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples understood the biochemistry of cold adaptation or simply learned through trial and error what worked. But the traditional Yakut diet is a masterclass in cold weather survival nutrition. Heavy on animal fats, organ meats, and fermented foods, it provides exactly what a body needs to generate and maintain heat. The raw frozen fish dish called stroganina isn't exotic cuisine. It's survival food, packed with proteins and fats that your metabolism can quickly convert to warmth. Your breathing changes in extreme cold. Each inhale brings in air so cold that your body has to work to warm it before it reaches your lungs. Your nasal passages are the first line of defense here, warming and humidifying the air. But at minus 70 degrees Celsius, this system is overwhelmed. The moisture in your nasal passages freezes. The tiny hairs, cilia, that normally trap particles and help warm air become brittle ice. You instinctively want to breathe through your mouth. But that's even worse. Cold air hitting your throat and lungs directly can cause bronchospasm, your airways constricting in protest. Locals learn to breathe shallowly through their nose, with their scarf or collar pulled up to create a pocket of slightly warmed air. Here's a quirky detail that sounds like folklore but is absolutely real. In extreme cold, you can actually hear your breath freeze. As the moisture in your exhaled breath crystallizes, it creates a soft, tinkling sound that Russians call the whisper of the stars. It's beautiful and eerie, this audible reminder that you're breathing in conditions where water doesn't stay liquid long enough to fall as rain. It simply becomes ice, directly, no intermediate step required. Sardana bundles you into what she considers appropriate clothing for a short walk, just 20 minutes outside. You're wearing thermal underwear, a wool layer, a fleece layer, an insulated jacket, an outer windproof layer, 2 pairs of socks, insulated boots, 2 pairs of gloves, a balaclava, a hat, a scarf, and snow pants. You look like you've put on weight by wearing your entire wardrobe at once. You can barely move your arms. Good, Sardana says approvingly. You look almost sensible. The building's entrance is a double-door airlock system. This isn't a fancy architectural feature. It's a necessity. Opening one door directly to outside would let in so much cold air that everyone in the ground floor hallway would be in danger. So there's an unheated buffer zone, a kind of purgatory between the living world and the frozen hell outside. You step through the first door into this space and immediately feel the temperature drop. Through the second door, you can see fog, the moisture from the heated building condensing and freezing in the gap. Sardana opens the outer door and you step into Yakutian winter properly for the first time. The cold is a physical blow. Even with all your layers, even prepared for it, the cold finds you. It's intelligent and malicious, probing every gap in your defenses. The tiny space between your scarf and your collar. The place where your gloves meet your sleeves. The fraction of skin around your eyes that you can't cover without blinding yourself. The cold finds these places and exploits them ruthlessly. Your eyes begin watering immediately, a reflex to protect them from the dry, cold air. Those tears freeze on your eyelashes. You blink and feel them crack and reform. Within 30 seconds, your eyelashes are thick with ice. Breathing is difficult. Even through your scarf, the cold air makes your throat ache. You try to take a deep breath and end up coughing. Small breaths, Sardana reminds you, like sipping hot tea. Small, careful sips of air. Your fingers, despite 2 pairs of gloves, are already starting to hurt. Not cold yet, just hurt. A deep ache as the blood vessels constrict and your body decides your hands are expendable. You flex them, trying to keep blood flowing, and Sardana nods. Good. Keep moving everything. Toes, fingers, face muscles. Don't let anything stay still too long. You're walking down a residential street, and the otherworldliness of it strikes you. People are out, not many, but some. A woman walks past with a shopping bag, her face so bundled you can only see her eyes. A man scrapes ice off his car windows with a specialized tool that looks more like a weapon. 2 children run past, laughing, their voices muffled by scarves. They're playing. In minus 68 degrees Celsius, children are playing. Your mind struggles to reconcile this. The snow here doesn't behave like snow in milder climates. It's not wet and packable. It's dry, almost dusty, squeaking under your boots with each step. This is because the snow is so cold that it's essentially tiny ice crystals that won't compact or stick together. You can't make snowballs with this stuff. It's more like walking on styrofoam that hates you. 5 minutes in, and you're experiencing something strange. Parts of you are too hot. Your core, wrapped in all those layers and working overtime to generate heat, is actually sweating. But your extremities are going numb. Your face hurts so much you want to touch it, to make sure it's still there, but Sardana slaps your hand away. Never touch face with gloves, she snaps. Moisture from gloves freezes on skin, makes it worse. This is the bizarre reality of extreme cold. You can be simultaneously overheating and freezing to death. Sweating in this environment is dangerous because moisture is the enemy. Wet clothing loses its insulating properties. That sweat will freeze, creating a layer of ice next to your skin, pulling heat away from your body even faster. Experienced Yakutians dress in precise layers, calibrated to keep warm without overheating, and they adjust constantly. Unzipping a jacket for 30 seconds to let moisture escape, then zipping it again before too much heat is lost. Your toes are concerning you. They don't hurt anymore, which Sardana explains is actually more worrying than pain. Pain means blood still flowing, nerves still working. No pain means no blood. We go back soon. You've been outside for 12 minutes. 12 minutes, and your body is already beginning to fail at its most basic task of staying alive. But here's what's fascinating. Your body is also adapting, even in these few minutes. Your metabolism has shifted into high gear. Your shivering has found a rhythm, no longer the violent shaking of the first minute but a steady, almost mechanical tremor. Your breathing has naturally adjusted to the shallow, careful pattern Sardana described. Humans are remarkably adaptable. We're also remarkably fragile. Both things are true simultaneously. On the walk back, Sardana points out a man working on a building's exterior, doing some kind of welding or repair work. He's been outside for what must be at least an hour, possibly more. He takes breaks every 15 minutes, she explains. Goes inside, warms up, drinks hot tea, goes back out. Working in this cold is possible, but only with discipline. Only with respect for what the cold can do. Back in the airlock, the transition is shocking. The buffer zone feels warm even though it's well below freezing. Your body's calibration is completely confused. Inside the building proper, you're hit with what feels like tropical heat. You're gasping, yanking off your scarf, pulling off your hat. Sardana stops you. Slowly, she says. Remove layers slowly. Let body adjust. Too fast and you shock your system. Get sick. She makes you keep your outer layers on for 5 full minutes. Standing in the overheated hallway, sweating and miserable. Only then does she let you start carefully removing clothing. As you peel off layers, you notice that the innermost one, the thermal underwear against your skin, is damp with sweat despite the extreme cold outside. This is why we change clothes when we come in, Sardana explains. Never stay in damp clothes. Even inside, even warm, the moisture will chill you. Back in the apartment, she inspects your face and hands critically. Your cheeks are red and painful. First-degree frostbite, basically a cold burn. Your fingertips are white and numb. She runs them under lukewarm water, not hot, which would damage the tissue, and gradually the color and feeling return. The pain as sensation comes back is intense, a burning, tingling agony that makes you gasp. This is good, Sardana says unsympathetically. Pain means recovery, means the tissue lives. She shows you her own hands, strong, weathered with thick calluses and scars. See here. She points to the tip of her left pinky. Lost this piece 40 years ago. Was young, was stupid, took off glove to tie something. 30 seconds, maybe. That's all it took. The tip of her finger is indeed slightly shortened, the nail deformed. 30 seconds of exposed skin in deep cold and permanent damage. Your body knows how to protect itself. she continues, pouring more tea. But it's not perfect. It will sacrifice your fingers to save your heart. It will let your toes die to keep your brain alive. This is why we use tricks, tools, knowledge. We help the body do its job better. This is where the traditional techniques come in, not replacing the body's natural defenses but augmenting them, outsmarting the cold through accumulated generations of trial and error. The ash in the boots, which still sounds crazy to you, the specific way of layering furs, the breathing techniques, the constant movement, the knowledge of exactly how long you can stay out before damage becomes permanent. Modern science has caught up to what Yakutians knew empirically. There's a phenomenon called non-shivering thermogenesis, where the body generates heat through metabolic processes without muscle movement. Babies do this naturally through brown adipose tissue, brown fat. Adults can develop it through repeated cold exposure. Long-term residents of Yakutia show higher levels of brown fat activation and more efficient metabolic heat production than people from warmer climates. Their bodies have literally adapted at a cellular level to make survival more efficient. You spend the rest of the day recovering from 20 minutes outside, and that's humbling. Your face is sore, your fingers tingle, you're exhausted in a way that makes no sense. You barely walked a quarter mile. But your body is exhausted from the sheer effort of not dying, from running its metabolism at maximum capacity, from the stress of operating in an environment that's fundamentally hostile to human life. Sardana makes a lunch that seems absurdly heavy. Thick fish soup with chunks of fatty meat, black bread with butter, sweet tea, and small pastries filled with what tastes like pure lard. You eat it all and find yourself still hungry. The cold makes you hungry, she explains. Your body burns maybe 4,000 calories a day here just staying warm. More if you work outside. So we eat. This is not gluttony. This is survival. As evening settles, which happens by 3 p.m. because winter here is mostly night, you sit by the window with your tea, watching the city lights flicker on. Your respect for the people of Yakutia has increased exponentially. This isn't just cold. This is an active threat, every moment of every day for months on end. And yet life continues. People work, shop, socialize, fall in love, raise children, celebrate, mourn, and live full lives. Your body is already learning. Your breathing is better. Your instinct to bundle your face is stronger. You're starting to understand the rhythm of cold survival, the constant small adjustments, the never-ending vigilance, the respect for an environment that will kill you without malice or hesitation if you make a mistake. Tomorrow, Sardana promises, you'll learn about the ash technique and other traditional methods. Tonight, you're content to simply sit in the warmth, feeling sensations slowly return to your toes, and marveling at the sheer stubborn resilience of human beings who looked at minus 71 degrees Celsius and said, "Fine, we'll just bring ash." Morning number 2 in Yakutsk, and you're starting to understand the rhythm of polar winter. The sun makes its brief, half-hearted appearance around 10 a.m., casting long orange shadows across the frozen city before giving up entirely by 2 p.m. Today the thermometer reads a balmy minus 64 degrees Celsius, and Sardana actually uses the word warm to describe it, which tells you everything about how warped your sense of temperature is about to become. Today's lesson is practical. The accumulated wisdom of people who've been outsmarting lethal cold for thousands of years. Sardana has laid out an array of items on her kitchen table that look like they belong in a museum rather than a survival kit. Strips of reindeer hide, chunks of what looks like hardened fat, felt insoles, and yes, a small metal container of wood ash, still faintly warm from yesterday's fire. The Saka people didn't just survive here. They thrived. Sardana begins, settling into her teacher role with clear pride. We bred horses and cattle when everyone said it was impossible. We built permanent settlements when nomadic life would have been easier. We did this because we learned to work with the cold, not against it. She picks up a piece of reindeer hide, the fur thick and luxurious. Everything we use, everything we wear, comes from understanding what works through trial and error over thousands of years. The reindeer hide is the foundation of traditional Yakut cold weather survival. Not just any fur, specifically reindeer and specifically prepared in a particular way. Sardana explains that reindeer hair is hollow, filled with air pockets that create extraordinary insulation. Each hair is like a tiny thermos bottle. When woven together into hide, these hairs create a layer of trapped air that insulates better than almost any synthetic material modern science has produced. The Saka people figured this out roughly 2,000 years ago through simple observation. Reindeer don't freeze to death, so wear what reindeer wear. But here's the quirky detail that makes you appreciate the sophistication of this knowledge. The hide must be from a winter-killed reindeer, when the coat is at its thickest, and it must be prepared using a specific fermentation process involving, improbably, sour milk. The lactic acid in the milk breaks down the hide in just the right way to keep it supple in extreme cold. Modern tanning methods make the leather too stiff. It cracks and breaks at these temperatures. The traditional method, perfected over centuries, creates a hide that remains flexible at -70 degrees Celsius. Sardana hands you a traditional Yakut boot, a gorgeous, intimidating thing made of reindeer hide with the fur on the outside, coming up past your knee. It's surprisingly light. Feel inside, she instructs. You reach in and find it lined with more fur, but also with thick felt insoles that can be removed. This is the system, she explains. The boot itself is the shell, but what goes inside, that changes based on the cold. Now comes the ash technique, the thing that's been mystifying you since you first heard about it. Sardana takes the container of ash, fine, gray, still slightly warm from sitting near the radiator, and demonstrates. She takes the felt insole from the boot and creates a thin layer of ash across it, maybe a 1/4 inch thick. Then she places a second thin piece of felt over the ash, creating an ash sandwich. This insole goes into the boot. Your feet sweat, even in cold, she explains. This moisture is death. It makes the insulation fail, conducts heat away from your skin, freezes into ice against your toes. The ash, it absorbs this moisture immediately, keeps your feet dry. But more, the ash holds heat. When you prepare the ash, you keep it by the fire so it's warm. You put warm ash in your boots, and your feet start warm. This gives you maybe an extra hour before the cold reaches them. You're skeptical. Ash seems so primitive. Surely modern science has something better? Sardana reads your expression and laughs. Modern materials are good for moderate cold. For this cold, for all-day outside work, nothing beats ash. Soviet scientists studied this in the 1960s. They tried silica gel, synthetic crystals, chemical warmers. Nothing worked as well as ash for the combination of moisture control, heat retention, and availability. You know what's always available in winter? Ash from the fire you're using to stay alive. She has you try it, preparing the ash insole yourself, fitting it into the boot, sliding your foot in. The warmth is immediate and startling. The ash, still holding heat from the fire, creates a gentle, even warmth across the entire sole of your foot. It's not hot, just perfectly, blissfully warm. And as you walk around the apartment, the ash compacts slightly, conforming to your foot, creating a custom insole that also happens to be absorbing any moisture your foot produces. You change the ash every day, Sardana continues. Old ash goes back to the garden, it's good for soil. New ash from the fire goes in the boots. This way, your feet stay dry, stay warm. In deep cold, when you're outside for hours, this is the difference between keeping your toes and losing them. It's not romantic. It's not high-tech. It's just smart. Historians still argue whether the ash technique was discovered independently by various cold climate peoples or spread along trade routes, but variations of it appear among the Inuit, the Sami, and various Siberian groups. The principle is universal. In extreme cold, moisture management is as important as insulation, and ash is nature's perfect desiccant. Cheap, renewable, effective, and readily available anywhere humans are making fire to survive. Next, Sardana shows you the layering system, which is more complex than just wear everything you own. There's a specific logic to it. The layer against your skin must wick moisture away. Traditionally, this was thin, soft reindeer hide worn fur side in. The next layer is for insulation, thicker fur worn fur side out. The outer layer is windproof, usually seal or fish skin, which is naturally water resistant and blocks wind while still allowing some moisture to escape. You see modern people, they wear cotton, it gets damp from sweat, and they freeze, she says with disdain. Cotton kills in this cold. We never used plant fibers against skin, only animal products. Animals survive here, so we learned from them. This is the fundamental philosophy of Yakut cold weather survival. Biomimicry before anyone invented the fancy term for it. If an animal thrives in this environment, study what it's doing and copy it. She demonstrates the proper way to wrap your face, which is an art form in itself. The scarf, traditionally woven reindeer wool, wraps around your neck first, crosses over your chest for extra core warmth, then comes up to cover your mouth and nose, leaving only your eyes exposed. But even your eyes need protection. Traditional Yakut people used thin strips of birch bark with narrow slits cut in them, the same snow goggle technology that Arctic peoples worldwide developed. The slits reduce the blinding glare of sun on snow while preventing your eyes from freezing in the wind. The reindeer fat technique is next, and this one makes you genuinely uncomfortable. Sardana pulls out a container of what looks like yellowish lard, rendered reindeer fat, solid at room temperature but soft enough to spread. Before you go out, you rub this on any exposed skin. Very thin layer. Creates a barrier against wind and holds in heat. Also, if you get frostbite, the fat protects the damaged skin as it heals. The smell is gamey. Not terrible, but definitely the smell of animal. You dab a tiny bit on your cheek as instructed. Feels greasy and weird, and you're certain you'll smell like a butcher shop. But Sardana nods approvingly. This is how we protected faces for thousands of years. Your fancy chapstick, it freezes solid, becomes useless. This fat, it stays workable even at minus 70 degrees Celsius. She's right, of course. You remember your expensive lip balm from yesterday, how it became a useless waxy chunk the moment you stepped outside. The traditional methods aren't quaint folklore. They're rigorously tested technology, refined over millennia of people dying when things didn't work and surviving when they did. Natural selection for techniques with human lives as the selective pressure. The breathing technique is subtle but crucial. Sardana demonstrates, breathing in slowly through her nose with her scarf pulled up, creating a pocket of warmer air. You never breathe deep and fast in this cold. Always slow, always through the scarf. The scarf warms the air before it reaches your nose. Your nose warms it more. By the time air reaches your lungs, it's maybe minus 30 degrees Celsius instead of minus 70 degrees Celsius. Your lungs can handle that. She teaches you the walking rhythm too. Steady, not rushed, because rushing makes you breathe hard and sweat. Sweating is death. You've heard this so many times now it's becoming a mantra. Outside, you move with purpose but not panic. You conserve energy. You stay dry. These two rules keep you alive. There's a traditional Yakut garment called a kurkur, a long coat made of reindeer hide that goes nearly to your ankles, with the fur on the outside creating a smooth surface that wind slides over rather than penetrating. Sardana pulls one from her closet, an heirloom from her grandmother, probably 80 years old but perfectly functional. It's beautiful in a utilitarian way, decorated with intricate beadwork and dyed leather patterns. But every decorative element also serves a function. The beads at the collar weight it down so wind can't get under it. The patterns are made with contrasting dark and light fur so you're visible in snowstorms. She helps you into it and the difference is immediate. It's like being wrapped in a living thing. The reindeer hide still somehow holding the warmth of the animal it came from. The coat is heavy, maybe 15 pounds, but the weight is distributed perfectly, and it moves with you rather than restricting you. In this, you can survive outside all day, Sardana says. Maybe not comfortable, but survive, yes. The traditional footwear is equally sophisticated. Those boots you tried earlier, in their complete form, they're called ituk, designed to be worn with multiple liner layers that can be adjusted based on temperature. At minus 40 degrees Celsius, you might wear them with just the ash and one fur liner. At minus 70 degrees Celsius, you add a second liner, more ash, and possibly stuff dried grass between the layers for extra insulation. The grass, like the ash, is both insulator and moisture manager. Here's a detail that seems almost magical. Traditional Yakut people could predict temperature changes by how their breath behaved. Sardana teaches you the signs. If your breath freezes instantly into ice crystals that fall straight down, it's around -50 degrees Celsius. If it creates a cloud that hangs in the air briefly before crystallizing, maybe -40 degrees Celsius. If it creates fog that rises slightly before freezing, you're in the warm zone of -30 degrees Celsius or above. These aren't precise measurements, but they're accurate enough to know whether you need to add another layer or can risk removing one. The traditional dwelling, a yurt-like structure called a balagan, was engineered specifically for extreme cold, low and round to minimize surface area exposed to wind, with a central fire pit and a smoke hole that could be partially closed in the worst cold. The floor was layered with birch bark, then dried grass, then hides, creating insulation from the permafrost below. Families slept in a communal pile, sharing body heat, with the youngest children and elderly in the center where it was warmest. Privacy was a luxury people in milder climates could afford. In Yakutia, survival came first. Sardana mentions a technique for emergency survival that sounds like a fairy tale but is absolutely real. If caught outside in a blizzard with no shelter, you can kill a large animal, a horse or reindeer, gut it and crawl inside the body cavity. The animal's residual body heat and the insulation of its hide can keep you alive through a night that would otherwise kill you. My grandfather did this once, she says matter-of-factly. His horse broke its leg far from home. Storm came up. He survived. The horse obviously did not, but he lived to tell the story. The traditional diet makes even more sense now that you understand the metabolic demands. Stroganina, that raw frozen fish, is served with salt and pepper, and you try it properly for the first time. The fish is sliced paper-thin while frozen solid, and it melts on your tongue, the fat content providing immediate energy. It's surprisingly good, clean-tasting and satisfying in a way that has nothing to do with sophisticated cuisine and everything to do with your body recognizing efficient fuel. There's a traditional drink called kumis, fermented mare's milk, that sounds disgusting but is apparently a nutritional powerhouse. Slightly alcoholic, full of probiotics, easily digestible proteins, and vitamins. The fermentation makes it possible to digest in cold when your stomach doesn't work as well, Sardana explains. And the alcohol, just a little, helps the body generate heat. Not enough to get drunk, just enough to help. You spend the afternoon practicing these techniques. Wrapping your face correctly, adjusting your layers, preparing ash insoles, moving in the heavy reindeer coat with the particular gait that conserves energy. It's training for a hostile environment, and Sardana is relentless, making you repeat each action until it's automatic. When you're cold and tired and your brain is foggy from early hypothermia, you can't think through these steps, she insists. They must be automatic. Muscle memory saves lives when brain fails. As the brief daylight fades again, you realize you've been given something precious. The accumulated survival wisdom of a people who've lived in impossible conditions for thousands of years. The ash in the boots isn't a cute historical curiosity. It's brilliant engineering. The reindeer fat on exposed skin isn't primitive superstition. It's effective barrier protection that modern science still can't significantly improve upon for these specific conditions. The Yakut people didn't just adapt to the cold. They mastered it, developing a sophisticated relationship with an environment that kills the unprepared. And they did it without weather forecasts, without synthetic materials, without central heating. Just observation, experimentation, passing down knowledge, and the kind of deep respect for nature that comes from knowing it can erase you without effort. Tomorrow, Sardana promises you'll put all this knowledge to use with a longer trip outside. 2 hours in the cold, properly equipped, properly prepared. You'll visit the local market, see how daily life functions at temperatures that should make life impossible. Tonight, you prepare your ash insoles for tomorrow, warming the ash by the radiator, feeling its fine texture between your fingers. It seems absurd that this simple substance, the residue of burned wood, could be the difference between keeping and losing your toes. But then again, everything about surviving at -71 degrees Celsius seems absurd until you understand the logic behind it. The cold doesn't care about your assumptions. It doesn't care about modern technology. It just is absolute and implacable. The traditional Yakut techniques work because they were developed by people who couldn't afford failure, refined by generations who survived while those who didn't learn properly didn't leave descendants to tell their stories. You're starting to think like a Yakut person. Not, how do I beat the cold? But, how do I negotiate with it? Not, how do I stay comfortable? But, how do I stay alive? It's a profound shift in perspective, and you're only just beginning to understand its depths. Day 3 dawns, if you can call the grudging twilight that passes for midday dawn, with the thermometer showing minus 67 degrees Celsius and a light wind that makes it feel closer to minus 80 degrees Celsius. Wind chill isn't just a meteorological concept here. It's the difference between manageable misery and actual danger. Sardana checks the weather with the seriousness of a general planning a military campaign. Wind is from the north, she announces. We stay close to buildings, use them as windbreaks. No shortcuts across open spaces. Today you're venturing to the Central Market, a 2-hour expedition that will test everything you've learned. You dress in layers with ritualistic precision. Thermal underwear, wool shirt, fleece pullover, the reindeer hide coat, double socks with ash-prepared insoles in the Atuk boots, 2 pairs of gloves, thin wool inside, thick mittens outside, the balaclava, scarf, hat, and snow pants that make you waddle like an overstuffed penguin. The reindeer fat goes on your cheekbones, nose, and the tiny bit of forehead that will be exposed. You smell like an ancient hunter, and you've never felt more prepared for anything in your life. The exit from the building is now familiar, the double-door airlock, the buffer zone, the psychological preparation for the assault of cold. But this time you're ready. This time you know what's coming. The cold still hits like a freight train made of frozen malice, but you don't panic. You breathe shallowly through your scarf. You tuck your chin. You start walking with the steady, energy-conserving rhythm Sardana taught you. The city at this temperature is a study in adaptation. Every single thing you see has been modified, engineered, or reimagined to function in conditions that break normal reality. Cars idle continuously because turning them off means they might never start again. The oil turns to sludge, the battery dies, the fuel line freezes. Parking lots are full of running vehicles, exhaust creating a forest of vapor columns. The fuel economy is terrible, the environmental impact is significant, but the alternative is walking everywhere, and walking everywhere in minus 67 degrees Celsius isn't practical for a city of 300,000 people. The buildings loom on their stilts, and you notice details you missed before. Every ground floor window has thick frost on the inside corners, ice formations that look like alien landscapes in miniature. This isn't poor construction, it's physics. When inside air is plus 25 degrees Celsius and outside air is minus 67 degrees Celsius. That's a 92-degree temperature differential trying to equalize through walls, windows, and every microscopic crack. Ice finds a way. The ice formations are actually useful diagnostics. Experienced residents can tell if their insulation is failing by how the ice patterns change. You pass a small grocery store with its door opening and closing as people enter and exit. Each opening releases a dragon's breath of vapor. The warm, moist air from inside flash freezing the instant it meets the outside. The door itself is wrapped in thick insulating material and has 3 separate seals. Even so, the store must lose incredible amounts of heat every time someone shops for milk. The economics of simply existing here are staggering. A municipal worker is repairing something on the street, working with tools modified for extreme cold. Standard steel becomes brittle and can shatter at these temperatures, so tools are made from special alloys. But even with the right tools, the work is brutal. The worker is dressed in what looks like a full-body sleeping bag with arms and legs, moving slowly, deliberately. Every 15 minutes, like clockwork, he retreats to a heated trailer nearby. Sardana nods approvingly. Smart. He'll finish his shift with all his fingers. The walk takes you past a school, and you see children arriving for the day. They're bundled like tiny, colorful bears, but they're running, playing, throwing that dry, powdery snow at each other despite the temperature. Their laughter is muffled by scarves but unmistakable. This is normal for them. They were born into this cold, and they'll grow up mastering it the way children in milder climates master riding bikes or swimming. At minus 68 degrees Celsius, schools remain open. At minus 73 degrees Celsius, they close, not because the children can't survive the walk, but because the risk of a child falling through ice or getting lost in the ice fog becomes too high to accept. Ice fog is something Sardana warns you about. When air temperatures drop below -40 degrees Celsius and there's moisture in the air from human activity, car exhaust, heating systems, even breathing, the moisture doesn't form clouds. It forms ice crystals suspended in air, creating a thick, disorienting fog made of tiny frozen particles. Visibility can drop to a few meters. People get lost walking familiar routes because the ice fog swallows all landmarks. The fog catches light in strange ways, creating halos around streetlights, false shadows, phantom shapes. It's beautiful and deadly. You arrive at the market after 45 minutes of walking, and your body has found a rhythm. Your breathing is steady and controlled. Your face hurts, but it's a manageable hurt, not the screaming pain of yesterday. Your feet in their ash-lined boots are still warm, not comfortable but genuinely warm. The ash is working. This absurd, ancient technique is actually working. You can feel the slight dampness in your socks being wicked away, your feet staying dry while they stay warm. Sardana was right about everything, which is both reassuring and humbling. The market is housed in a Soviet-era building that looks like a concrete bunker, which is essentially what it is, a fortress against cold. The entrance is an elaborate airlock system with 3 sets of doors, each creating a temperature buffer zone. The outermost zone is maybe -30 degrees Celsius, warmer than outside but still well below freezing. The middle zone is around 0 degrees Celsius. Only the innermost zone is properly heated. This gradual transition prevents the thermal shock that can make people sick and reduces heat loss from the building. Inside, the market is a sensory overload after the muted, frozen world outside. Bright lights, warm air, the smell of food, people talking. It's overwhelming after the quiet intensity of the walk. And everyone is performing the same ritual you are. Slowly, carefully removing layers, letting their body adjust. Rush this process and you'll be sick for days. Your immune system is already stressed from the constant temperature extremes. Give it too much shock and it simply gives up. The market itself is fascinating. A glimpse into how daily life functions when your environment is actively trying to kill you. The produce section is small and expensive. Fresh fruits and vegetables have to be imported from thousands of miles away and transported in heated trucks that consume fuel at an alarming rate. An apple costs 3 times what it would in Moscow. A tomato is a luxury item. Most people buy frozen fish, dried meat, preserved foods, things that don't mind the cold because they're already cold. There's an entire section dedicated to fur and hide goods, coats, boots, hats, mittens, blankets. Every piece is functional art, decorated with traditional patterns but designed primarily to keep you alive. The shopkeeper, an elderly Yakut man with a face like weathered leather, shows you a pair of mittens made from wolverine fur. Wolverine is special, he explains. The fur doesn't hold moisture, doesn't frost up from your breath. Best fur for anything near your face. Very expensive, but worth it if you work outside. He's not exaggerating about the price. These mittens cost more than a decent laptop. But this is survival equipment, not fashion. You're beginning to understand that in Yakutia, clothing isn't about style or status, though those elements exist. It's primarily about not dying. The most expensive items are the most functional, the ones that keep you alive at the temperature extremes. A really good reindeer hide coat can cost a month's salary, but it will last decades and might save your life multiple times. There's a small cafe in the market, and Sardana insists you stop for tea and soup. The soup is called 5 Fingers, salamat, a traditional Yakut dish made from butter, flour, and water, whipped into a thick, creamy soup that's more fat and calories than anything else. It tastes strange to your modern palate, almost greasy, but you eat it all because your body is screaming for calories. You've been outside for less than an hour of walking, and you're starving. The cafe is full of locals taking warming breaks. Some are market workers on their lunch break. Others are people like you and Sardana, shoppers refueling between the expedition here and the expedition home. A group of old men sits in the corner playing cards, their daily ritual apparently unaffected by the weather. They've been surviving Yakutian winters for 70, 80 years. The cold is just weather to them, the way rain is just weather to people in England. Sardana knows half the people in the cafe, exchanging greetings in Yakut. a Turkic language that sounds musical and strange to your Russian-trained ear. Historians still argue whether the Yakut language preserves ancient Turkic features lost in other branches or developed them independently in isolation, but either way, it's a language shaped by cold. There are, supposedly, 17 different words for various types of snow and ice, each describing specific conditions that matter when your survival might depend on knowing if the ice will hold your weight or if the snow is dry enough to build a shelter. After warming up for 20 minutes, it's time to shop and then face the walk home. You buy dried fish, frozen berries, some mysterious preserved meat, black bread that's hard as a rock when frozen but softens when thawed. Sardana buys ash from a vendor who sells it by the bag. Premium wood ash from specific trees, apparently better than what you'd get from your own fireplace. Even ash has quality grades here. The vendor, a middle-aged woman with the permanent squint of someone who's spent a lifetime in snow glare, explains, birch ash is best, absorbs moisture better, holds heat longer. Larch ash works too. Never use pine. The resin makes it clumpy, doesn't absorb well. This is the level of detail that life here demands. You can't just use ash. You need to know which ash from which tree prepared how. Every detail matters when the margin for error is measured in minutes of exposure before frostbite. The walk home is harder. You're tired now, your calorie reserves depleted despite the soup. The wind has picked up slightly, and even with all your layers, you can feel it finding the microscopic gaps in your defenses. Your face, even with the reindeer fat protection, is starting to hurt in that deep, bone-aching way that signals the early stages of frostbite. You flex your facial muscles constantly. Eyebrows up and down, jaw clenching and releasing, nose scrunching, keeping blood flowing, keeping tissue alive. Sardana sets a steady pace, neither rushing nor dawdling. You pass a small memorial plaque on a building wall, in memory of someone who died in a blizzard 30 years ago, just 50 meters from this building, unable to find the door in the ice fog. It's a stark reminder that this environment is unforgiving. People die here not from spectacular disasters but from simple mistakes. Not checking the weather, not bringing spare mittens, not respecting the cold's ability to kill. You notice your breath is freezing in your eyelashes despite your best efforts to breathe downward through your scarf. Ice is building up, weighing down your lashes, making blinking difficult. This is annoying but not dangerous, unless the ice gets thick enough to freeze your eyes partially shut, which can happen in extreme cold with extended exposure. Sardana shows you how to use your mittened hand to carefully brush away the worst of the ice without touching your actual skin. Your feet are still warm, and you're genuinely amazed. The ash technique works. Your socks are damp, you can feel it, but your feet are warm and the dampness isn't reaching your skin because the ash is absorbing it as fast as your feet produce it. This simple technology, probably older than written language, is outperforming your expensive modern hiking boots from yesterday by every metric that matters. The final stretch home takes you through a residential area where someone has hung laundry outside. This seems insane until Sardana explains. In this cold, wet clothes freeze instantly and the ice sublimates. Turns directly from ice to vapor without becoming water. It's a form of freeze-drying, and it actually works, though it takes days instead of the hours a dryer would take. But electricity is expensive and dryers can break down, so some people still use the old method. The clothes hanging in the 67-degree sea air are stiff as boards, but they're getting dry. You finally reach Sardana's building after 2 hours outside. You've survived your longest cold exposure yet. The airlock transition is now familiar, almost comforting. The gradual warmth feels like salvation. But you follow Sardana's instructions. Keep the outer layers on for 5 minutes, then remove them slowly, letting your body adjust to each temperature change. Inside the apartment, the ritual continues. Wet socks off immediately, replaced with dry ones. The ash from your boots goes into a container. It'll be dried near the radiator and reused, because nothing here is wasted. The reindeer hide coat goes on a special hanger near, but not too near, the radiator to dry out any moisture. Your inner layers are damp with sweat and must be changed. Even inside, even warm, damp clothing is dangerous. Your face in the mirror is startling. Red patches on your cheeks and nose, white spots on your forehead. First stage frostbite, not serious but not great either. Sardana inspects it critically and applies some kind of traditional ointment that smells like bear grease and pine sap. "This will heal it by tomorrow," she promises. "But you pushed a little too hard today. 2 hours is too much for someone not adapted. Next time, 90 minutes maximum until your body adjusts better." You're exhausted in a way that sleep won't fully fix, the exhaustion of operating at your physiological limits for hours. Your body has burned thousands of calories keeping you alive. Your muscles are sore from the constant micro-shivering you weren't even conscious of. Your nervous system is frazzled from hours of maximum alertness. You eat another enormous meal. More soup, more bread, more butter than any human should consume, and you're still hungry. Sardana makes the observation that you're adapting faster than most outsiders. Usually takes a week before someone can do 2 hours comfortably. You did it on day 3. Maybe you have Siberian ancestors. Yes, she's joking, but there's truth to the idea that some people adapt to extreme cold better than others. Your body is learning, metabolizing differently, distributing blood flow more efficiently. You're becoming, in a small way, a cold-adapted human. That evening, you watch the weather report on Sardana's television. The meteorologist, dressed in a studio that's probably plus 25 degrees Celsius, calmly discusses the forecast. Minus 69 degrees Celsius tonight, possibly hitting minus 72 degrees Celsius by morning, with light winds. Schools will be closed tomorrow. Outdoor work is suspended. People are advised to limit unnecessary travel. This is presented with the same tone that weather forecasters in California use to discuss whether it might rain. Extreme cold is just weather here, just part of the normal human experience. Before bed, you prepare tomorrow's ash insoles, warming the birch ash by the radiator, feeling its fine, silky texture. Such a simple thing, this ancient technique. No patents, no marketing, no brand names. Just knowledge passed down through generations. Put warm ash in your boots, change it daily, keep your feet dry and warm. It works at minus 71 degrees Celsius, which is more than can be said for most modern innovations. You fall asleep thinking about the choreography of daily life here, the constant calculations, the never-ending vigilance, the rituals that keep people alive. Buying groceries isn't a casual errand. It's a planned expedition. Getting to work isn't a commute. It's a survival challenge. Having a life, raising children, pursuing happiness. All of it happens while negotiating with an environment that kills mistakes. And yet, people thrive. Not just survive, thrive. They laugh, they love, they create, they build communities. The Yakut people have been doing this for thousands of years, and they've developed not just techniques but an entire philosophy of living in the cold. Respect it, prepare for it, never underestimate it, but also don't fear it to the point of paralysis. You're beginning to understand why people stay, why they love this harsh land. There's a purity to life here, a clarity. What matters is what keeps you alive and what makes that life worth living. Everything else is negotiable. Morning 4 arrives with the promised minus 72 degrees Celsius, cold enough that the Weather Service has issued a black frost warning, the highest level of cold alert. Schools are closed. Outdoor construction stops. Even the markets operate on reduced hours. This is the kind of cold where simply existing outside becomes a calculated risk, where the margin between life and death narrows to minutes, where every traditional technique you've learned stops being interesting folklore and becomes absolutely essential survival knowledge. Sardana decides this is the perfect day to teach you the ash technique in complete detail. Not just the basic preparation you've been doing, but the full traditional method passed down through her family. "My grandmother taught me this when I was 7 years old," she says, pulling out materials. She learned from her grandmother. This knowledge is maybe 1,000 years old, maybe more. No one wrote it down because everyone just knew. Now fewer people know. So I teach you. She starts with the ash itself, which you've been treating as a simple commodity. But there's an art to selecting and preparing ash for boot insoles. The wood matters enormously. Birch is preferred, specifically white birch, burned completely until only the finest ash remains. The wood must be dry, not green, because green wood produces ash with too much tar and resin. The fire must be hot enough to reduce the wood to pure white or light gray ash, with no chunks of charcoal remaining. You see this. Sardana holds up a handful of ash, so fine it flows like liquid between her fingers. This is perfect ash. Light, dry, powder fine. This ash can absorb moisture equal to its own weight and still feel dry. This is why it works. She lets you feel it silky, almost weightless, cool to the touch even though it's been warming by the radiator. Each particle is microscopically porous, creating millions of tiny spaces that trap both air and moisture. The preparation ritual begins. Sardana spreads newspaper on the kitchen table and lays out the components. Fresh birch ash, still faintly warm from last night's fire. Felt insoles, hand-cut to exactly match the interior of your boots. Thin cotton fabric for wrapping, and a special tool that looks like a small wooden paddle, smooth from generations of use. First, you warm the ash more, she instructs, placing the container near the radiator but not touching it. You want it body temperature or slightly warmer. Too hot and it burns, too cold and you lose the benefit of starting with warm feet. The ash sits for 20 minutes, absorbing heat from the air. Meanwhile, she shows you how to prepare the felt insoles, checking for any rough spots that could cause blisters, ensuring the edges are smooth, looking for signs of where that might compromise their function. The assembly process is precise. Sardana places the felt insole on the newspaper and uses the wooden paddle to spread ash across it. Not dumped carelessly, but carefully distributed in an even layer about 5 millimeters thick. Too much ash and it compacts too hard, becomes uncomfortable, she explains. Too little and it doesn't absorb enough moisture. The layer must be even. No thick spots, no thin spots, or your foot pressure will shift it around and create lumps. She smooths the ash with the paddle using techniques that are clearly practiced over decades. The ash layer ends up perfectly uniform, edges precisely defined, thickness consistent. Then comes the cotton wrap, a thin piece of fabric laid over the ash, tucked at the edges, creating a sealed pocket. This keeps the ash in place and creates a barrier between the ash and your sock. Direct contact isn't good. Too much ash dust works into the fabric of your socks, ruins them. The wrapped insole goes into the boot, ash side down. But there's technique even to this. The insole must sit perfectly flat, no wrinkles in the cotton, no bunching at the edges. Sardana demonstrates the proper way to settle it, using her fingers to smooth from center to edges, ensuring complete contact with the boot's interior. Air gaps reduce the insulation, she notes. Everything must be snug, must be right. Now comes the science behind why this works, and it's more sophisticated than you'd initially thought. The ash serves multiple functions simultaneously. It's a desiccant, absorbing moisture from sweat before it can saturate your socks and conduct heat away from your feet. It's an insulator, trapping air in its millions of tiny pores. It's a thermal mass, starting warm and releasing that warmth gradually over hours. And it's moldable, conforming to the exact shape of your foot as you walk, creating a custom insole that distributes pressure evenly. But here's the detail that showcases the deep understanding of cold weather physiology. The ash absorbs moisture through a process that generates a tiny amount of heat. It's called the heat of adsorption. When water molecules bond to the surface of the ash particles, the chemical process releases energy as heat. It's a minuscule amount, barely measurable, but over hours of wear with constant moisture absorption, it adds up. Your feet are being kept warm by your own sweat, captured and converted into warmth by the ash. It's elegant chemistry that Yakut people understood empirically centuries before Western science could explain it. Sardana has you practice the preparation yourself, selecting the ash, warming it, spreading it evenly, wrapping it properly, settling it in the boot. You do it clumsily the first time, ash spilling over the edges, the layer uneven. She makes you dump it out and start over. And again, and again. By the fifth attempt, you're getting it right, smooth, even properly wrapped, perfectly settled. This is not something you do carelessly when you're tired and cold and need to leave quickly, she emphasizes. This is something you do every night before bed, preparing for tomorrow. Make it routine, make it automatic. The used ash, the stuff you remove from yesterday's boots, isn't waste. Sardana shows you how to evaluate it. If it's still relatively dry and light-colored, it can be dried out completely and reused for less demanding days. If it's saturated and clumped, it goes to a container destined for the garden. Ash is good fertilizer, returns minerals to soil. In spring, we spread all winter's used ash on the garden. Nothing is wasted. In Yakutia, waste is a luxury no one can afford. She tells you about her grandmother, who survived the terrible winter of 1938 when temperatures hit -77 degrees Celsius for nearly a week. Food was scarce, fuel was limited, people were dying. But grandmother survived because she knew every trick, every technique. The ashen boots. This saved her feet when she had to walk 10 kilometers for water because the well near her home had frozen solid, all the way to the bottom. 10 kilometers there, 10 back, carrying water at -75 degrees Celsius. The ash kept her feet alive. This isn't nostalgic storytelling. This is oral history, the passing down of survival knowledge that might, someday, mean the difference between life and death for you. The Soviet period brought modernization, but it also saw traditional knowledge being dismissed as primitive superstition. Scientists in Moscow, who'd never experienced real cold, designed boots with synthetic insulation that failed catastrophically in Yakutian conditions. People who abandoned the ash technique in favor of modern methods ended up with frostbitten feet. The traditional knowledge survived because it worked while the modern innovations failed. There's a scholarly debate among anthropologists about whether indigenous Arctic peoples developed their techniques through systematic experimentation or through what some researchers dismissively call lucky accidents. Sardana snorts when you mention this. Lucky accidents don't last 1,000 years, she says flatly. Our ancestors experimented constantly, observed carefully, remembered what worked and what killed people. This is science, just not written in books by university professors. She's right, of course. The ash technique represents generations of careful observation. Which wood produces the best ash, how fine to grind it, how thick to layer it, how often to change it, how to prepare it for maximum effectiveness. Each element was tested with human lives as the experimental subjects. The techniques that worked were preserved and refined. The techniques that failed were abandoned, along with the people who tried them. Its evolution applied to knowledge, brutal, effective, and absolutely rigorous. The temperature outside is now -73 degrees Celsius, approaching the record cold for this date. Through the window, you can see ice fog forming, thick, disorienting, turning the visible world into a white void punctuated by the ghostly halos of streetlights. People are staying inside unless absolutely necessary. The few vehicles moving through the streets crawl along, headlights barely penetrating the fog of frozen air. Sardana tells you about the hierarchy of cold-weather footwear, the traditional progression every Yakut child learned. For mild cold, anything above -40 degrees Celsius, simple wool-lined boots might suffice. From -40 degrees Celsius to -60 degrees Celsius, you need the full reindeer hide Atuk boots with single ash insoles. Below -60 degrees Celsius, you add double insoles, grass stuffing, and possibly wrap the boots in an additional layer of hide. Below -70 degrees Celsius, you're in survival territory where even the best techniques are just buying you time. There's a limit, she admits. Below -75 degrees Celsius, humans really shouldn't be outside for extended periods, no matter what precautions. The ash helps, the reindeer hide helps, everything helps, but physics doesn't care about human determination. Cold this extreme will find a way through eventually. The record for outdoor survival, meaning actually working, not just briefly stepping outside, is around 6 hours at -78 degrees Celsius, achieved by a reindeer herder who had no choice because his animals were in trouble. He survived with severe frostbite on his toes and fingers, but he survived. The ash technique was part of why. You ask about alternatives, about modern materials that might work better. Sardana is surprisingly open-minded about this. If someone invents something better, I'll use it, she says. I'm not romantic about tradition. I'm practical about survival. But so far, nothing works better than ash for the specific combination of moisture absorption, heat retention, availability, and cost. Scientists have tried. They've tested silica gel, chemical heat packs, synthetic moisture barriers, space-age materials. For moderate cold, some of these work well. For Yakutian winter, ash still wins. There's a knock at the door. A neighbor, an elderly man named Piotr, checking in to make sure Sardana has enough food and firewood for the cold spell. This is community survival in action. In extreme cold, isolation kills. People check on each other, share resources, watch for signs that someone's heating has failed or they're running out of supplies. Piotr is a retired reindeer herder, and when he hears Sardana is teaching you about the ash technique, he lights up with the enthusiasm of someone getting to discuss their area of expertise. "I've used ash in boots for 70 years, he says, settling into a chair with tea. "Never had frostbite on my feet. Not once, even working outside all day in coldest weather. Hands, yes, lost 2 fingertips 50 years ago when I was young and stupid. But feet, never. The ash saved me countless times." He pulls off his socks, with Sardana's permission, to show you his feet. They're weathered, calloused, with thick toenails and the kind of rough skin that comes from a lifetime of hard use. But they're intact. All toes present and functional. At his age, in this climate, this is remarkable. Piotr shares a variation on the technique he learned from Evenki herders, mixing a small amount of dried moss with the ash. The moss adds extra insulation and absorbs moisture even better than ash alone, he explains. But you must use the right moss, sphagnum, from the wetlands, dried completely. Wrong moss and it becomes scratchy, uncomfortable, defeats the purpose. This is the kind of regional variation, the local innovation, that makes indigenous knowledge so rich. The basic principle, ash for moisture and warmth, remains constant, but communities adapted it to their specific environments and available materials. He also tells you about emergency ash preparation when you don't have birchwood. Willow works, though the ash is heavier. Alder works. Even pine in emergency, though you have to process it more to remove the resin. I once used ash from dried cow dung when I had nothing else. Spent 3 days away from home. Unexpected storm. My ash ran out. Dung ash isn't great, but it kept my feet functional until I got back to proper supplies. In survival, perfect is enemy of functional. The conversation shifts to the younger generation, and both Sardana and Piotr express concern. "Too many young people don't learn the old techniques," Piotr says sadly. "They buy expensive modern boots, rely on technology, then wonder why their feet freeze. The schools used to teach this, ash preparation, hide preparation, reading weather signs. Now they teach computer programming and English. Those are good skills, yes, but not if you die of frostbite before you can use them." Sardana is more optimistic. "Some young people are interested. They see the wisdom in traditional methods. And the internet helps. Young Yakut people share techniques online, teach each other, keep knowledge alive in new ways. Different from the old ways, but maybe just as effective." She pulls out her smartphone and shows you a Yakut language YouTube channel where a young woman demonstrates traditional crafts, including ash insole preparation. The video has thousands of views and hundreds of comments in Yakut, Russian, and English, people from around the world fascinated by this ancient survival technique. As evening settles, which happens by 2 p.m. at this latitude in deep winter, the temperature outside hits -74 degrees Celsius, the coldest it's been since you arrived. The ice fog is so thick now that you can barely see the building across the street. The city has essentially shut down. This is weather that demands respect, that forces even the most modern, technology-dependent people to acknowledge that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. You spend the evening practicing ash preparation, doing it over and over until Sardana is satisfied that you can do it properly even when tired, even when cold, even when your brain is foggy from early hypothermia. This is the goal: automaticity. When your life might depend on having properly prepared feet, you can't afford to mess up because you're too tired to focus. Later, preparing for bed, you check tomorrow's weather, warming up to -65 degrees Celsius, with clear skies, practically tropical by local standards. You prepare your ash insoles for tomorrow with new confidence, spreading the birch ash in an even layer, wrapping it carefully, settling it perfectly in your boots. This simple act, repeated daily by thousands of people across Yakutia for centuries, is a quiet victory over an environment that wants you dead. The ash sits in your boots, warming slowly from room temperature, ready to keep your feet alive tomorrow. It's not romantic. It's not high-tech. It's just ash from burned wood, selected carefully, prepared properly, used wisely. And it works at minus 71 degrees Celsius, which makes it one of the most effective pieces of survival technology ever developed by human beings. You fall asleep thinking about the generations of knowledge embedded in those ash insoles, the observations, the experiments, the failures that killed people and the successes that saved them, all distilled into a simple technique that a child can learn but that represents sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics, moisture management, and human physiology. The ash is science. The ash is history. The ash is survival. And tomorrow you'll walk on it. Day 5. And the weather has improved to minus 65 degrees Celsius with brilliant sunshine that makes the snow-covered city glitter like a field of diamonds. The sunlight, weak and slanting even at its midday peak, nonetheless feels like a gift after days of twilight gloom. Sardana checks her phone and shows you the news. Yakutsk's modern infrastructure is being tested to its limits. A water main burst overnight, the pipes insulated and heated, but not enough for this extreme cold. A section of the city is without running water until repairs can be made, which won't happen until temperatures rise above minus 60 degrees Celsius because the repair work itself is too dangerous in deeper cold. This is the paradox of modern Yakutsk, a city of 300,000 people with internet, smartphones, shopping malls, and universities, but still fundamentally at the mercy of cold that can shut down any system humans have designed. The city is a monument to human stubborn determination, a place where cutting-edge technology and thousand-year-old techniques exist side by side, both necessary, neither sufficient alone. You're venturing out today to see how this collision of timelines actually functions. Your destination is the center of Yakutsk, where Soviet-era apartment blocks loom next to new glass and steel construction, where babushkas in traditional reindeer hide coats wait at bus stops next to teenagers in Canadian-made parkas, scrolling through Instagram on phones they keep in inside pockets so the batteries don't die from cold. The preparation is now routine. Thermal layers, the reindeer hide coat, your boots with fresh ash insoles prepared last night, double mittens, face protection. But today Sardana adds something new, a small emergency kit that locals carry during deep cold. It contains matches in a waterproof case, a small metal container with tinder, a chocolate bar, a space blanket, modern technology that actually works, a whistle, and a spare pair of thin gloves. If you get stranded, if your main gloves get wet, if you need to make fire, if you need to signal for help, everything is here, she explains. The kit fits in a coat pocket and weighs maybe 300 grams. It's the minimum survival margin between inconvenience and death. The bus stop is a heated shelter, a small building with thick walls, triple-glazed windows, and a heater running constantly. This is Soviet planning at its practical best. Recognizing that people will need to wait for buses in lethal cold, so build them proper shelters, not just poles with signs. Inside the shelter, a half-dozen people wait, their breath still visible in air that's probably only minus 10 degrees Celsius, tropical compared to outside. The bus, when it arrives, is running on studded winter tires and belching exhaust that freezes into dramatic plumes. The doors open and everyone boards quickly, minimizing the time the interior is exposed to outside air. The bus is overheated, probably plus 30 degrees Celsius, creating instant fog as everyone's frozen clothing begins to release moisture. Windows fog up completely within seconds. The driver doesn't even try to defrost them all, just keeps a small porthole clear on the windshield and drives with practiced expertise through streets he's navigated for 20 years. You pass a gas station where cars are queuing for fuel. The attendants work in shifts, 15 minutes outside pumping gas, 15 minutes inside warming up. The gas itself requires special winter formulation or it becomes too viscous to flow. The pumps are heated. The payment terminal is indoors because touchscreens stop working below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Every element of this mundane transaction has been re-engineered for extreme cold. The bus lurches and sways on snow-packed roads, taking twice as long as it would in summer. The pavement beneath the snow is cracked and buckled from the constant freeze-thaw cycle of the ground beneath. Except here, it's not freeze-thaw, it's just different degrees of frozen. The permafrost shifts and heaves, creating permanent infrastructure challenges. Roads need constant repair. Buildings need constant maintenance. Nothing stays stable when the ground itself is in slow, perpetual motion. You arrive in the city center, and the contrast is stark. Modern Yakutsk is trying very hard to be a normal city, with all the amenities and comforts of urban life anywhere in Russia. There's a Western-style shopping mall, its glass facade gleaming in the winter sun. Inside, it's indistinguishable from malls in Moscow or St. Petersburg, clothing stores, electronics shops, a food court with sushi and pizza. But the entrance is a triple airlock system, and just outside, people are dressed like they're preparing for an Arctic expedition, because they are. Sardana points out the adaptations everywhere once you know to look for them. The mall's parking garage is heated, because unheated parking would mean frozen cars that won't start. The escalators run constantly whether anyone's on them or not. Stopping them allows condensation to form and freeze in the mechanisms. The plants in the atrium are all tropical species, thriving in the artificial environment, creating a bizarre jungle in the middle of the coldest city on Earth. A young woman walks past in fashionable knee-high boots and a stylish wool coat, looking like she stepped out of a Moscow fashion magazine. But look closer. She's wearing serious thermal leggings under her jeans, her stylish coat has a thick fur lining, and she's carrying a bag that contains her proper outdoor boots and heavy coat. She'll change before leaving the mall. Fashion exists here, but it's negotiated with survival. You can't just wear what looks good. It has to function at -65 degrees Celsius. The coffee shop where you stop is called Coffee Arctic, playing into the extreme location branding. But the barista, a young Yakut man with bleached hair and multiple piercings, makes cappuccino with the same precision you'd find in any trendy cafe. He's wearing a t-shirt and jeans, utterly comfortable in the overheated interior. You ask him about traditional techniques like the ashen boots, and he looks slightly embarrassed. "My grandmother knows all that stuff," he admits. "I should learn it, but honestly, I have good boots, I drive a car with heated seats, I live 10 minutes from work. I don't really need to know how to use ash." But then he pauses. "Though last winter, my car battery died and I had to walk to work in -70 degrees Celsius, and my expensive boots weren't enough. My feet were freezing." Grandmother just shook her head and said I needed to learn the old ways. He grins ruefully. Maybe she's right. This is the generational tension playing out across Yakutia. The younger generation, urban and educated, often sees traditional techniques as quaint relics. Why use ash when you can buy thermal insoles? Why wear heavy reindeer hide when modern synthetic insulation is lighter? The answer comes during extreme cold snaps like this week, when modern systems fail and traditional knowledge suddenly matters again. Historians still argue whether indigenous knowledge should be preserved as cultural heritage or if it's acceptable for it to be replaced by modern technology. But in Yakutia, the debate is academic. The practical reality is that modern technology works wonderfully until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, at -71 degrees Celsius, you die if you don't have backup knowledge. A businessman walks past, talking on his phone in Russian, discussing contracts and deadlines like he could be anywhere. But his phone is in a special insulated case because batteries die in minutes at these temperatures. His briefcase contains not just documents, but also emergency supplies. His expensive SUV parked outside has been running continuously for 3 days because shutting it off risks it never starting again. His modern life is sustained by constant adaptation to extreme conditions. Sardana takes you to a traditional Yakut restaurant, an effort to preserve and celebrate indigenous cuisine. The menu features stroganina, of course, but also other dishes you've never heard of: iogos, frozen raw fish liver, kurcha, horse ribs, and salamat soup variations. The decor attempts traditional aesthetic, wood paneling, fur throws, reproductions of traditional tools, but it's all very curated, very Instagram-ready. This is tradition as performance, as identity marker, rather than as lived daily necessity. Yet the food is authentic, prepared by cooks who learned from grandmothers who learned from their grandmothers. The stroganina arrives paper-thin, still frozen, arranged artfully on a wooden board with salt and pepper. You eat it properly now, letting it melt on your tongue, tasting the pure fat and protein that kept people alive in this climate for millennia. It's good not in a gourmet restaurant way, but in a your body immediately recognizes this as valuable fuel way. An elderly couple at the next table is dressed traditionally, not for show, but because that's what they wear. The man's coat is genuine reindeer hide, probably 50 years old, patched and repaired but still functional. The woman's boots are hand-sewn at tuck, the beadwork faded but beautiful. They're eating horse meat and discussing something in Yakut, utterly unbothered by the fusion of traditional and modern happening around them. They've seen Yakutsk transform from a small settlement to a major city without losing their core identity. After lunch, Sardana takes you to a museum dedicated to Yakut culture and history. Here, the traditional techniques are preserved in glass cases like artifacts from a dead civilization, even though people still use them. There's a display on the ash technique with cross-sections showing how the insole is constructed, scientific explanations of the moisture absorption, historical photos of people preparing ash. It's strange seeing something you just learned as lived practice presented as museum-worthy history. But the museum also shows the continuity. Photos from the 1950s showing Soviet-era innovations like heated bus stops, special cold-weather concrete, insulated water pipes. Then photos from the 1990s showing the economic collapse, when modern infrastructure failed and people survived by reverting to traditional techniques. Then contemporary photos showing the current hybrid approach. Embrace modern technology but maintain traditional knowledge as backup. There's an entire section on permafrost engineering, the science of building on ground that's frozen solid year-round. The stilted buildings you've been seeing everywhere aren't just traditional architecture. They're sophisticated engineering solutions. If you build directly on permafrost, the building's heat melts the ground beneath it, and the structure sinks, tilts, eventually collapses. So you build on stilts or pilings driven deep into the permafrost, allowing cold air to circulate beneath, keeping the ground frozen. It's working with the environment rather than against it, the same philosophy as the ash technique applied to modern construction. You learn that Yakutsk sits on continuous permafrost extending down more than 500 meters in places, some of the deepest permafrost on Earth. This frozen ground is both foundation and threat. It provides stable building platforms if managed correctly, but it's also warming due to climate change, creating new challenges. Buildings designed for stable permafrost are now dealing with slightly thawing ground, requiring expensive repairs and reinforcement. A school group passes through the museum, teenagers in modern clothing, half paying attention, half sneaking looks at their phones. The guide, an enthusiastic woman in her 30s, is trying to make traditional knowledge relevant. Your ancestors survived here for thousands of years without heated buildings or grocery stores, she tells them. They use techniques like the ash in boots that are more effective than most modern solutions. This isn't just history, it's knowledge you might need. One kid raises his hand, but why do we need to know this if we have technology? The guide smiles patiently. Last winter, power failed in the northern district for 2 days. The people who knew traditional techniques, how to maintain heat, how to keep extremities warm, how to prepare food without electricity, they were fine. The people who relied entirely on modern technology. Several ended up in the hospital with frostbite. Traditional knowledge isn't about rejecting modern life. It's about having options when modern systems fail. The kid nods, unconvinced, but you notice a few others looking thoughtful. This is the challenge, making ancestral survival wisdom relevant to a generation that's grown up with smartphones and YouTube. But the cold doesn't care about generational preferences. The cold is the same implacable force it's always been, and it still requires the same respect and preparation. Outside again, you notice the smoke from chimneys rising in those strange frozen columns, the exhaust from cars creating instant ice fog, the way people move with purpose but without panic. Everyone here knows the choreography of extreme cold life. A woman unlocks her car and lets it run for 5 minutes before attempting to drive, warming the fluids, letting the metal expand enough to function. A man carries his groceries in an insulated bag because if food freezes on the way home, it can damage certain items. Children walk home from school in small groups, safety in numbers if anyone has trouble. The sun is already setting. It's 1:30 p.m., casting long purple shadows across the snow. The temperature is dropping as the sun disappears, and you can feel it immediately. The cold intensifies, becomes more aggressive. People walk faster, heading home before the truly deep cold of night arrives. Sardana checks her phone. Minus 67 degrees Celsius currently, expected to drop to minus 71 degrees Celsius by midnight. On the bus ride home, you reflect on the strange dual existence of Yakutsk. It's a modern city with all the technology and infrastructure of 21st century urban life. It's also a place where ancient survival techniques remain not just relevant but essential. The ash in your boots, the reindeer fat on your face, the specific breathing patterns, these aren't museum pieces. They're living technology, still in daily use, still saving lives. Back at the apartment, Sardana shows you her own hybrid approach to cold survival. She has a modern smartphone with weather apps and emergency services on speed dial, but she also has a hand-carved wooden thermometer outside her window because sometimes batteries die and you still need to know the temperature. She has a modern electric stove, but she maintains a wood-burning stove as backup because power fails sometimes. She has expensive modern boots, but she still uses ash insoles because they work better than anything else she's found. This is the Yakutian way now, she explains. We don't reject modern life. We embrace it, but we never forget that we live in a place that can kill us if we're unprepared. So we keep the old knowledge alive, not as tradition for tradition's sake, but as practical backup systems. The ash technique survives because it works, not because we're romantic about the past. That evening, preparing tomorrow's ash insoles, you understand what she means. You're using a smartphone to check tomorrow's weather. Minus 63 degrees Celsius, slightly warmer. You're wearing modern synthetic thermals. But you're preparing ash from birch wood, using techniques that predate written history, because at minus 71 degrees Celsius, this ancient technology outperforms almost everything modernity has invented. Yakutsk is a city that exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. Soviet infrastructure, traditional indigenous knowledge, modern globalized culture, all overlapping, all necessary. The ash in the boots is the perfect metaphor. Ancient wisdom, still relevant, adapted and maintained because survival demands the best tools regardless of when they were invented. Tomorrow, you'll learn what happens when things go wrong, when preparation fails, when the cold wins despite all precautions. But tonight, in the warmth of Sardana's apartment, you're grateful for both the radiator humming with modern efficiency and the container of birch ash warming by its side, representing thousands of years of human ingenuity applied to the simple problem of keeping feet from freezing. The cold doesn't care about your technology level. It just is. And surviving it requires every advantage you can muster, ancient, modern, or yet to be invented. Day 6 begins with a story Sardana clearly doesn't want to tell but knows she must. Over breakfast, thick porridge with butter melting into pools of golden fat. She speaks quietly about her cousin Mikhail, who died 15 years ago. He was 32, experienced with cold, born and raised in Yakutsk. He died less than a kilometer from his home in weather that was, by local standards, not even extreme. Minus 58 degrees Celsius, no wind, clear skies. Textbook winter conditions. He died anyway. He made 3 mistakes, Sardana says, staring into her tea. Just 3 small things. First, he'd been drinking, not drunk, but enough to impair judgment. Second, his gloves got wet somehow, and instead of going home immediately to change them, he kept walking. Third, he sat down to rest. Those 3 things, minor mistakes, things that would mean nothing in normal cold, they killed him in Yakutian winter. The alcohol slowed his body's ability to generate heat and clouded the judgment that would have told him he was in danger. The wet gloves meant his hands were losing heat rapidly, and sitting down, stopping movement, allowed his core temperature to begin dropping. By the time someone found him, 45 minutes later, he was gone. Hypothermia had shut down his brain, his heart, his life. Less than a kilometer from home, in a city, in conditions that locals consider manageable. This is what I need you to understand, Sardana says, her voice hard. The cold here doesn't care about your experience. It doesn't care if you're a tourist or a local who's lived here for 30 years. It doesn't care if you're close to home or far away. Make mistakes and it kills you. Simple as that. This lesson, she explains, is the most important one. Respect for what can go wrong, knowledge of how fast things deteriorate, understanding of the warning signs that your body is failing. Today's education is grim but necessary. The stages of cold injury, what they feel like from the inside, how to recognize them in yourself and others, what to do if things go wrong. You're hoping this is purely theoretical knowledge you'll never need, but Sardana's expression suggests otherwise. Everyone who lives here long enough will face cold injury at some point, she states flatly. The question is whether you recognize it in time. Frostbite comes first in the curriculum. There are degrees, literally and figuratively. First degree frostbite, what you've already experienced, is the ice burn that hurts like hell but doesn't cause permanent damage. Your skin turns red or white, feels numb or painful, but with proper rewarming, lukewarm water, never hot, it recovers fully within days. This is the warning shot. The cold's way of saying, pay attention or next time will be worse. Second degree frostbite is where permanent damage becomes possible. The tissue freezes deeper, ice crystals forming inside cells, rupturing them from within. You'll develop blisters filled with clear fluid within 24 hours of rewarming. The pain during rewarming is intense. People describe it as burning, as if the frozen tissue is on fire. Treatment requires medical attention. Recovery takes weeks. Some people end up with permanent sensitivity to cold in the affected areas. Third degree frostbite freezes all the way through skin and into underlying tissues. The frozen area turns hard, waxy, completely numb. Blisters form but are filled with blood instead of clear fluid. This is where you start losing tissue, skin dies, sometimes muscle beneath it, sometimes bone. Amputation becomes a real possibility. Sardana shows you a photo. A man's hand after third-degree frostbite, the fingers black and mummified. This is what happens, she says without emotion. This is what the cold does when you're not careful. Fourth-degree frostbite extends through skin, tissue, muscle to bone. Everything freezes solid. The tissue is dead before you even begin rewarming. There's no pain because all the nerves are destroyed. The affected area is completely numb, hard as frozen meat, pale or mottled. Treatment means amputation of the dead tissue. There's no saving it. This is what Sardana's friend Piotr experienced decades ago. Not quite fourth degree, but close enough that he lost those fingertips. But here's what makes frostbite insidious in extreme cold. It happens fast, and the early stages feel almost pleasant. Your fingers go numb, and actually the pain stops. Your toes lose sensation, and the ache disappears. Your brain, struggling to process multiple distress signals, interprets the numbness as relief. People have been known to smile as they develop serious frostbite because it doesn't hurt anymore. If pain stops suddenly, that's when you panic, Sardana emphasizes. Pain means blood flow, means nerves working. No pain often means serious damage happening. The treatment for frostbite is counterintuitive and agonizing. You want to rewarm slowly with lukewarm water, never hot. Never direct heat like a fire or radiator. You want to not rub or massage the area, even though every instinct says to. Rubbing frozen tissue causes the ice crystals inside cells to tear everything apart mechanically, making damage worse. You want to keep the affected area elevated and protected. And you want to be prepared for the pain of rewarming, which people describe as the worst pain they've ever experienced. I've seen grown men cry like babies during rewarming, Sardana says. The pain is extraordinary, but you endure it because the alternative is losing the tissue permanently. She pulls out a bottle of strong vodka. This isn't for drinking. This is for pain management during emergency rewarming if you can't get to a hospital. A few shots to take the edge off the agony. Not enough to impair judgment further, just enough to make the pain bearable. Hypothermia is next, and it's even more dangerous because it attacks your brain, the very organ you need to recognize that you're in trouble. Hypothermia begins when your core temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, just 2 degrees below normal. At this mild stage, you start shivering uncontrollably. Your hands become clumsy. Your thinking becomes slightly confused. You might feel cold but not recognize the danger you're in. As core temperature drops to 32 to 34 degrees Celsius, you enter moderate hypothermia. Shivering becomes violent, then paradoxically stops. Your body is too cold to generate the muscle contractions. Your confusion deepens. You become sluggish, apathetic. You might start making poor decisions, like taking off clothing because you feel hot, a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing that happens in late-stage hypothermia when dying blood vessels suddenly dilate, creating a false sensation of warmth. Below 32 degrees Celsius is severe hypothermia, and you're dying. Your pulse slows, breathing becomes shallow, you lose consciousness. Your heart rhythm becomes erratic. Eventually, cardiac arrest, death. From the beginning of symptoms to death can be as little as an hour in extreme cold, or it can take several hours depending on conditions. But once you're in moderate to severe hypothermia, your brain is too compromised to save yourself. You need someone else to rescue you. This is why we never go out alone in deep cold, Sardana explains. Why we check on neighbors. Why we notice if someone's walking strangely or talking confused. Hypothermia makes you stupid, and stupid decisions kill you faster. You need other people to recognize what you can't. She tells you about a phenomenon called terminal burrowing. In the final stages of hypothermia, people often crawl into small, enclosed spaces. They're found in closets, under beds, in cabinets, in positions that look like they were trying to hide. Scientists think it's an autonomic response, some deep mammalian brain function that makes dying animals seek shelter. We find people like this sometimes after storms, Sardana says quietly, curled up in strange places, having tried to burrow somewhere warm. It's how we know they were hypothermic when they died. The treatment for mild hypothermia is gradual rewarming, warm drinks, warm environment, dry clothing, gentle external heat. For moderate to severe hypothermia, you need hospital care. Attempting rapid rewarming can cause afterdrop, cold blood from the extremities rushing back to the core, actually lowering core temperature further, potentially causing cardiac arrest. People have died during rewarming from hypothermia because it was done too aggressively. Sardana makes you practice recognizing the signs on yourself and on her. She pretends to be hypothermic. Slurred speech, confused responses, sluggish movements. Your job is to identify the stage and the appropriate response. It feels morbid, like rehearsing for disaster, but she's relentless. Someday you might see this in someone. Someday someone might need to see it in you. This knowledge saves lives. Then comes the truly frightening part. Combined injuries. Frostbite and hypothermia together, which is common because the conditions that cause one often cause the other. Someone with hypothermic confusion might not notice their fingers freezing. Someone focusing on frostbitten toes might not realize their core temperature is dropping. The treatment priorities conflict. You want to rewarm frostbite areas, but you also need to prioritize core warming for hypothermia. Medical professionals are trained for this, but in a remote situation, you might have to make decisions. Core first, always, Sardana instructs. Dead fingers you can live without. A dead heart you can't. So core warming takes priority, even if it means sacrificing extremities. It's a terrible choice, but it's the right one. She shows you how to create emergency core warming, warm, sweet drinks for conscious patients, shared body heat, insulation from ground cold, protection from wind. In emergency, you strip both people naked and get in a sleeping bag together, skin to skin. It's not sexual, it's not romantic, it's physics. Two bodies share heat better than one body trying to generate it alone. There's a scholarly debate among survival experts about whether the old practice of giving alcohol to hypothermic people is helpful or harmful. The traditional view was that alcohol warms you up. Modern medicine says alcohol dilates blood vessels, actually increasing heat loss and potentially causing afterdrop. But in severe cases, when someone is conscious but severely hypothermic and you're hours from help, a small amount of alcohol might provide enough vasodilation to get warm blood back to extremities and prevent total organ shutdown, Sardana notes. It's a calculated risk. Everything in severe cold survival is calculated risk. She tells you about the time she herself experienced moderate hypothermia, 20 years ago, caught in an unexpected storm while visiting a remote village. Her vehicle broke down, temperatures dropped to minus 68 degrees Celsius with high winds, and she had to spend 6 hours in the disabled vehicle before rescue arrived. I knew the signs. I felt myself getting confused, but I knew that meant I was in trouble. I kept moving, small movements to generate heat. I wrapped myself in everything I had. I ate all my emergency food for the calories. And I stayed awake, because I knew if I fell asleep, I might not wake up. She survived with minor frostbite on 3 toes but without permanent damage, because she recognized what was happening and fought it with every technique she knew. The cold was trying to kill me. I could feel it, but I was smarter than the cold that day. I knew what to do, and I did it, even though my brain was foggy and I wanted to just rest. The knowledge saved me. The stories accumulate, each one a lesson written in someone's suffering or death. The teenager who went to a party in regular boots, drank too much, walked home in minus 55 degrees Celsius, lost 4 toes. The man who went ice fishing, fell through thin ice, couldn't get warm afterward, ended up with severe frostbite on both feet. The elderly woman whose heating failed overnight, who was found in the morning with moderate hypothermia, confused and trying to burrow under her furniture. But there are survival stories too. The truck driver whose vehicle broke down 100 kilometers from anywhere in minus 70 degrees Celsius weather, who survived 3 days by running the engine in short bursts to conserve fuel, by using cardboard from his cargo to insulate the cab, by eating snow for water and rationing his emergency food. He walked away with mild frostbite and a hell of a story. He survived because he didn't panic, Sardana says. Panic kills faster than cold. Panic makes you run when you should conserve energy, makes you waste heat, makes you stupid. She teaches you the mental techniques for managing fear in cold emergencies. Breathing exercises to slow panic. Mental checklists to keep your brain focused. The mantra her grandmother taught her: stop, think, don't rush, don't panic. You have time if you're smart. These psychological tools matter as much as the physical ones because your mind is either your best survival tool or your worst enemy. As afternoon darkness falls, Sardana takes you outside for a practical exercise. It's minus 63 degrees Celsius, almost warm by recent standards. She walks you to a quiet spot behind the building and says, take off your right mitten. Hold it off for 60 seconds. I'm timing. You do reluctantly. The cold on your bare hand is immediate and vicious. After 30 seconds, your fingers are painful. After 45 seconds, they're going numb. At 60 seconds, you're panicking, fumbling to get the mitten back on. Your fingers are white and completely numb. That's how fast it happens, Sardana says. 1 minute of bare skin, and you're on the edge of frostbite. Remember this feeling. Remember how fast the numbness came. This is what you're fighting every time you're outside. You spend the next 10 minutes carefully re-warming your hand, watching the color return, feeling the painful pins and needles as circulation restores. It's a visceral, unforgettable lesson. Back inside, she shows you her emergency medical kit, the serious one, not the small one you carry daily. It contains chemical heat packs, emergency blankets, bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, antibiotics, sterile needles, sutures, and a detailed manual on cold weather injury treatment. This is what I keep at home always. In my car, I have a smaller version. Everyone here does, because help might be hours away, and you need to be able to handle emergencies yourself. The evening ends with Sardana sharing one final story. Her grandmother survived the siege of a remote village during World War II, when supply lines were cut and people faced winter without adequate food, fuel, or clothing. Many died. Her grandmother lived by using every traditional technique she knew: the ashen boots, the reindeer fat, the knowledge of how to maintain body heat on minimal calories. She was 16 years old, and she kept her younger siblings alive through that winter by being smarter than the cold. Traditional knowledge isn't romantic history. It's the accumulated wisdom of people who survived when others died. You fall asleep that night with new respect for the danger you're living in. The cold isn't an adventure or a challenge. It's a constant threat that requires constant vigilance. Every time you step outside, you're entering an environment that will kill you if you make mistakes. The ash in your boots, the layers on your body, the emergency kit in your pocket. These aren't accessories. They're the tools that keep you alive. Tomorrow, Sardana promises something different. The psychology of living with extreme cold. How people maintain sanity and happiness in an environment that's dark, frozen, and hostile for months on end. But tonight, you're just grateful for warmth, for intact fingers and toes, for the knowledge that might someday save your life or someone else's. The cold is always there, waiting, but now you know what it can do, how it does it, and how to fight back. Day 7, and you wake to something you haven't experienced since arriving. A sense of routine. The thermometer reads -61 degrees Celsius, which your brain now processes as moderately cold, rather than incomprehensibly lethal. This recalibration of perception is exactly what Sardana wants to discuss today, how the human mind adapts to living in conditions that should, by all reasonable standards, be uninhabitable. The body adapts in weeks, she says over breakfast. The mind, that takes longer and it's harder, or maybe easier. It depends on the person. Today's lesson isn't about physical survival but psychological survival. How people maintain mental health, find joy, build community, and create meaning in a place where winter darkness lasts months and stepping outside unprotected means death. The darkness is the first challenge. From November through January, Yakutsk receives only a few hours of weak twilight daily. The sun rises around 10 a.m., reaches its pathetic apex barely above the horizon, and sets by 2 p.m. That's 4 hours of dim, slanting light that doesn't even qualify as daylight by temperate zone standards. The rest is darkness, deep, complete, unrelenting darkness for 20 hours a day. Humans aren't built for this, Sardana admits. We're tropical animals, evolved for sun and warmth. Living here requires fighting your own biology. Seasonal affective disorder is nearly universal. Depression rates spike in winter. Alcoholism is a constant battle. People self-medicating the darkness with vodka, which of course makes everything worse. The suicide rate in Arctic regions is significantly higher than in temperate zones. A grim statistic that locals rarely discuss but everyone knows. The traditional response was to embrace the darkness rather than fight it. My grandmother's generation, they didn't try to pretend it was sunny, Sardana explains. They accepted that winter is dark and cold, and they structured life around that reality. Work less in deep winter. Sleep more, tell stories, make crafts, save the big projects for summer when you have energy and light. This rhythm, it's healthier than modern life that demands you be equally productive year-round. But modern Yakutsk doesn't operate on traditional seasonal rhythms. Jobs demand consistent productivity. Schools run on fixed schedules. Life marches forward regardless of whether the sun is shining or hiding. So people adapt through various coping mechanisms, some healthy, some less so. Light therapy is common, special lamps that simulate daylight, helping regulate circadian rhythms and mood. Vitamin D supplements are consumed religiously. Coffee consumption per capita in Yakutsk is among the highest in Russia. Sardana shows you her own setup. A bright light therapy lamp in her kitchen, positioned where she sits for breakfast. 30 minutes every morning while I eat, she explains. It helps. Not perfectly, but enough that I don't want to hibernate through February. She also keeps plants. Lots of them. Creating a green oasis in her apartment. Psychologically, it matters. Something alive. Something growing. Even when everything outside is frozen and dead. The social structures here are different too, shaped by the understanding that isolation kills. Not just physically, though that's true, but psychologically. In extreme cold climates, community isn't optional, Sardana says. It's survival. People check on neighbors constantly. Extended families live close together, often in the same building. Social obligations are taken seriously because they're not just social. They're the safety net that catches people before depression, alcoholism, or despair leads to tragedy. There's a tradition called kumis drinking circles, groups of friends and neighbors who gather regularly in winter to share fermented mare's milk, food, and conversation. The kumis is part of it, but mostly it's about the gathering, the ritual of connection. Humans need other humans, Sardana states simply. In winter darkness, in extreme cold, this need becomes critical. The kumis circles keep people sane. She takes you to one that evening, a gathering at Pyotr's apartment, the elderly reindeer herder you met earlier. About a dozen people crowd into his small living room, ranging from teenagers to elders. The kumis is poured, slightly fizzy and sour, mildly alcoholic. People talk, argue, laugh. Someone plays a komis, a traditional jaw harp that produces a weird, otherworldly droning sound. A woman sings in Yakut, an old song about winter and survival. The conversation flows between Yakut and Russian, people code-switching naturally. They discuss local news, the burst water pipe, someone's new grandchild, a friend who moved to Moscow and is already talking about coming back because he misses the cold. Someone makes a joke about tourists who come to experience real winter and leave crying after 2 days. Everyone laughs, including you, because you nearly were that tourist. What strikes you is the genuine warmth in the room, and not the physical warmth from the overheated apartment, but the emotional warmth between people who understand they're all fighting the same battle against darkness and cold. There's a lack of pretense, a directness to the interactions. When someone asks how you're doing, they actually want to know. When someone offers help, they mean it. Extreme environments seem to strip away social bullshit, leaving only the essential human connections. Pyotr tells a story about the winter of 1979, when he was herding reindeer in the far north and got caught in a blizzard that lasted 5 days. I was alone with just the reindeer and my dogs, he says. Could have died easily, but I didn't because I wasn't really alone. I had the animals, and I had the knowledge my father and grandfather taught me. And I had the certainty that people back home were thinking about me, waiting for me, expecting me to survive and return. He pauses. That psychological certainty, that you matter to others, that your death would wound your community. It's powerful. It keeps you fighting when the easy thing would be to give up. Historians still argue whether traditional Arctic peoples had lower rates of depression and suicide than modern Arctic populations. But the ethnographic evidence suggests that strong community bonds and acceptance of seasonal rhythms provided significant psychological protection. Modern Arctic life, with its demands for year-round productivity and its partial breakdown of traditional community structures, may actually be psychologically harder despite being physically easier. A young mother at the gathering talks about raising children in extreme cold, the constant anxiety of watching them play outside, knowing that a lost mitten or a wandered-off moment could mean disaster. But they're tougher than children elsewhere, she says with pride. My daughter is 6, and she knows more about survival than many adults in warmer places. She can read weather signs. She knows how to layer clothing properly. She understands that nature is beautiful and also dangerous. These lessons, they're valuable. The children here do seem different, more self-sufficient, more aware of their environment, more comfortable with risk assessment. A 7-year-old can explain the difference between dry cold and wet cold, and why one is more dangerous. A 10-year-old knows how to build an emergency shelter from snow blocks. These aren't exceptional children. This is just normal childhood education in Yakutia. As the evening progresses, the conversation turns philosophical. What does it mean to thrive, not just survive, in such an extreme place? Someone quotes a Yakut proverb, "The cold teaches us what matters." Another person counters that the cold also teaches harshness, that beauty and warmth have to be fought for rather than simply enjoyed. A debate ensues about whether living in extreme conditions makes people stronger or just more weary. An old woman, maybe 80, silent until now, speaks up. "We stay because this is home," she says simply. "Not because it's easy or because we're tough. Because the land is in us and we're in the land. My ancestors survived here for thousands of years. Their blood is in my blood. Leaving would be cutting out part of my soul." There's a murmur of agreement. This is the answer to the question tourists always ask. Why do you live here? Because it's home, and home isn't rational. The gathering breaks up around 10 p.m., people bundling up for the walk back to their apartments. Outside, it's minus 63 degrees Celsius and fully dark, but the streets aren't empty. People are out, walking, living. A couple holds hands, thick mittens touching, as they navigate the icy sidewalk. Teenagers gather under a streetlight, laughing, their breath creating a communal fog. Life continues, insistent and defiant, in conditions that should preclude it. Back at Sardana's apartment, you ask her directly, does she ever want to leave? She considers the question seriously. In February, yes. Every February, I think about moving to Sochi, to the Black Sea, somewhere warm. I imagine what it would be like to step outside without preparation, to wear light clothing, to feel warm rain. She pauses. But then spring comes. The sun returns. The birds migrate back. The land comes alive in a way that's so intense, so beautiful, because it was dead for so long. And I remember why I stay. She explains the concept of Arctic joy, a particular kind of happiness that comes from surviving what shouldn't be survivable, from finding beauty in a harsh landscape, from the deep bonds formed with people who share your struggle. Joy in temperate places is easy, she says. Joy here, you have to work for it, fight for it, create it deliberately. But when you find it, it's intense in a way that easy joy never is. There's also defiant pride in living somewhere extreme. Yakutians take a certain pleasure in shocking outsiders with their casual relationship to lethal cold. When you tell people you live where winter temperatures hit -70 degrees Celsius, their status in that a badge of toughness. It's a bit silly, maybe, but it's also genuine. Pride in mastering a challenge that most humans on Earth will never face. The psychological adaptation includes developing a different relationship with cold itself. Newcomers fear the cold rationally because it can kill them. Long-term residents respect the cold but don't fear it in the same visceral way. The cold is like a dangerous neighbor, Sardana explains. You know what it can do, you take precautions, but you don't live in constant terror. You just adjust your life around the reality of this neighbor who might kill you if you're careless. This acceptance of danger as a constant background reality seems to affect other risk assessments too. People here take what would seem like absurd risks in other contexts, working on roofs at -50 degrees Celsius, driving across frozen rivers, hunting in extreme conditions, because if you didn't take calculated risks, you couldn't really live. The alternative is staying inside from November to March, which would drive anyone insane. Sardana pulls out old photo albums, showing you Yakutsk across decades. Black and white photos from the 1960s showing Soviet-era construction, people in traditional dress mixed with Soviet workers, the city being built on stilts above the permafrost. Color photos from the 1990s showing harder times, economic collapse, people reverting to more traditional survival methods. Recent photos showing modern development, smartphones, contemporary fashion, but always with the cold as context, the ever-present threat and reality shaping everything. Each generation finds new ways to cope, she muses. My grandmother's generation had traditional rhythms and strong community. My parents' generation had Soviet certainty and collective support systems. My generation has technology, therapy, global connections. The next generation will find their own ways. But the cold remains the same, and we all have to make peace with it somehow. You think about your own psychological journey over the past week. You arrived terrified of the cold, seeing it as an enemy to be defeated or endured. Now you're beginning to see it as Sardana does, not an enemy but a reality, a fact of life that shapes everything but doesn't prevent life from being rich, meaningful, even joyful. The shift is subtle but profound. That night, you dream of warm places, beaches, sunshine, tropical rain, but you wake feeling oddly nostalgic for the cold. Not the physical experience of it, which is still uncomfortable and dangerous, but the clarity it brings. In extreme cold, what matters is obvious: warmth, shelter, food, community. Everything else is negotiable. There's something almost peaceful about that simplicity, even as the cold itself is anything but peaceful. The next morning, preparing your daily ash insoles, you realize you're not counting down days until you can leave. You're settling in, adapting, finding the rhythms that make life here possible. The ash feels familiar now, the ritual comforting. The extreme cold outside is still extreme, still dangerous, but it's becoming part of your normal, part of your daily reality that you navigate rather than endure. Sardana watches you work and nods approvingly. You're adapting, she says. Not just your body, your mind. This is good. This is how people survive here, not just physically but psychologically. You accept the reality, find the beauty in it, and build a life anyway. And somehow, improbably, that's exactly what you're doing. Day 8, and you wake before Sardana, something that hasn't happened yet. The apartment is quiet except for the familiar sounds of extreme cold. the building creaking and settling, the radiator hissing, the faint tinkle of ice crystals forming on the window corners. The thermometer outside reads minus 69 degrees Celsius, and your first thought isn't terror or even discomfort. It's simply acknowledgement. This is the temperature. This is reality. Time to prepare accordingly. You're making tea when Sardana emerges, looking surprised and pleased. You're up, she observes, and you've already prepared your boots for the day. The ash insoles sit warming by the radiator, perfectly spread, properly wrapped. The ritual has become automatic muscle memory rather than conscious effort. You're thinking like a Yakutian now, she says with satisfaction. Today's plan is ambitious. A visit to a village about 40 kilometers from Yakutsk, where traditional life continues more purely than in the city. It's not a museum piece or a tourist attraction, just a small community where people live as their ancestors did, modified by modern necessities but rooted in ancient patterns. The journey itself will be a test of everything you've learned. The vehicle is a UAZ, a Russian utility vehicle built like a tank, specifically designed for Siberian conditions. It's been running since last night, the owner unwilling to risk shutting it off in this cold. The interior is pleasantly warm, but Sardana makes you pack as if the vehicle will definitely break down. Extra clothing, emergency food, a sleeping bag, fire-starting materials, the serious medical kit. In winter, you never trust vehicles completely, she explains. Metal becomes brittle, rubber shatters, electronics fail. You always prepare for the vehicle to fail. The driver is Gavril, a man in his 50s with the weathered face of someone who's spent a lifetime in extreme conditions. He drives with casual competence, navigating ice-rutted roads that look impassable. The landscape outside is otherworldly, endless white, broken only by the dark vertical lines of larch trees, their needles long since dropped for winter. The sky is that particular purple-gray that passes for daylight here, the sun a pale disk barely visible through ice fog. Every few kilometers you pass abandoned vehicles, cars and trucks that died and were simply left until spring when recovery might be possible. Some years, the road is lined with dead vehicles, Gavril comments. This year isn't so bad. Only 20 or 30 between here and the village. He says this as if it's a reassuring statistic, and perhaps it is by local standards. The isolation is profound. You're only 40 kilometers from a city of 300,000, but you might as well be on another planet. If the vehicle fails here, help is far away and might not arrive for hours. This is the reality that most of Earth's population never experiences, true remoteness, where mistakes have immediate and serious consequences, where self-sufficiency isn't a lifestyle choice but a survival requirement. Halfway to the village, Gavril pulls over near a small memorial, a simple cross with a name and dates. My cousin, he says quietly, died here 8 years ago. Vehicle broke down. Weather was bad, he tried to walk for help. We found him 2 days later. He pauses. He made the classic mistake, left the vehicle. If he'd stayed with it, used it as shelter, he'd be alive. But panic got him, and the cold one. This is a recurring theme in Yakutian life. The vehicle, the shelter, the preparation, these aren't just conveniences. They're life support systems, and abandoning them is almost always fatal. Sardana adds her own story. A friend's father survived 3 days in a broken vehicle by burning the spare tire for heat. Terrible for the lungs, probably took years off his life, but he lived. Stayed with the vehicle, waited for rescue, survived. The cold teaches you that patience is survival. The village, when you arrive, is smaller than you expected. Maybe 30 buildings, all on stilts, scattered along a frozen river. Smoke rises from every chimney, and the smell of burning wood is strong. This is a community of about 150 people, mostly Yakut, living in a way that's changed remarkably little over centuries. They have electricity, diesel generators expensive to run, and satellite internet, a concession to modernity. But the fundamental patterns of life are ancient. Sardana's friend Adalina greets you at her home, a traditional log structure elevated 2 meters above the permafrost. Inside, it's a fascinating blend of old and new. A wood-burning stove dominates one corner, but there's also a modern refrigerator, though in winter, people joke, the refrigerator is anywhere outside. The challenge is keeping food from freezing too hard. The walls are thick, insulated with moss and clay in the traditional manner, creating remarkable warmth against the -69 degrees Celsius outside. Adelina is teaching her granddaughter, maybe 10 years old, how to prepare ash insoles. The girl works with focused concentration, spreading ash with a small wooden paddle, her technique already quite good. She's learning young, Adelina says proudly. By the time she's 15, she'll know everything she needs to survive here. Then she can choose stay in the village with the old ways or move to Yakutsk, maybe even to Moscow. But she'll always have this knowledge. It's her inheritance. The girl, Sina, looks up and asks you in careful Russian how you're finding Yakutia. You tell her honestly that it's the hardest thing you've ever done, but also the most clarifying. She nods seriously. My friend moved to Krasnoyarsk last year, she says. She says she's bored because nothing there is difficult. Everything is easy. She says she might come back because she misses the challenge. From a 10-year-old, this is a remarkable perspective. Understanding that difficulty can be valuable, that ease isn't always desirable. Adelina shows you the winter food storage, a deep cellar dug into the permafrost, natural refrigeration that never fails. Inside, frozen fish are stacked like cordwood, preserved reindeer meat hangs from hooks, and barrels of fermented foods line the walls. This is how we survive winter, she explains. All summer and fall we prepare. We gather, we preserve, we store. Then winter comes and we live on what we prepared. If you didn't prepare well, winter is hungry. This is the fundamental rhythm of Arctic life that modernity has partially obscured but not eliminated. In the village, it's still dominant life structured around the absolute reality of winter. You work incredibly hard in summer when you can, storing food and fuel and supplies. You rest more in winter, conserving energy, living carefully on what you've stored. Fighting this rhythm is exhausting and usually unsuccessful. The village's heated greenhouse is a point of pride. A Soviet-era structure maintained with difficulty but providing fresh vegetables even in winter. The heating costs are astronomical, but the psychological and physical benefits of fresh food in winter make it worthwhile. Inside, it's a shocking +25 degrees Celsius, humid and green, growing tomatoes and cucumbers, while outside is -69 degrees Celsius. The temperature differential of nearly 95 degrees across a single wall of glass and insulation is almost surreal. Lunch is a communal affair, the entire village gathering in the largest building, which serves as school, community center, and gathering place. The meal is traditional. Reindeer meat stew, black bread, stroganina, preserved berries, kumis. People eat enormous portions, their bodies burning through calories at a rate that would horrify nutritionists from warmer climates. A typical adult here consumes 4,000 to 5,000 calories daily in winter, and no one is overweight. The cold burns it all. During the meal, an elder named Nikolai, perhaps 90 years old, his face like carved wood, speaks about the importance of maintaining traditional knowledge. The young ones, they learn about computers and English and business, he says. This is good. The world changes, but they must also learn the old ways because the cold doesn't change. The cold is eternal, and knowledge of how to live with the cold. This is what has kept our people alive for thousands of years. He tells a story about his own childhood, learning survival techniques from his grandfather in the 1940s. Grandfather made me sleep outside one night in winter in a snow shelter I built myself. I was 12 years old. I was terrified, but I survived. And after that night, I never feared the cold the same way. I understood it. I knew what I could endure. He looks directly at you. Fear comes from ignorance. Knowledge brings respect, and respect allows coexistence. The afternoon is spent learning skills you haven't yet encountered. How to build a snow shelter. Not just pile snow, but construct a proper quinzhee with ventilation and insulation. How to start a fire with damp wood in extreme cold. How to navigate by stars and terrain features when ice fog obscures everything. How to read animal tracks in snow to understand what's happening in the frozen landscape. Each skill is small but potentially life-saving. Sina, the 10-year-old, shows you how to make traditional Yakut footwear. Not the full boots, but the inner liners. sewn from soft reindeer hide. Her stitching is careful and even the product of hundreds of hours of practice. "I've been sewing since I was 5, she says matter-of-factly. "By the time I'm grown, I'll be able to make everything I need: boots, clothing, bedding. This way, I'm never helpless. I can always provide for myself." This self-sufficiency is emphasized constantly in the village. Modern conveniences are appreciated, but no one depends on them entirely. Everyone knows how to live without electricity, without store-bought food, without vehicles. It's backup knowledge, insurance against the inevitable failures of modern systems. And in a place where failure means death, this insurance is precious. As evening approaches, which means 1 p.m., as the weak sun begins its descent, you prepare for the journey back to Yakutsk. The temperature has dropped to -71 degrees Celsius, and ice fog is forming. Gavril checks the vehicle meticulously, testing every system, ensuring nothing has frozen during the visit. "We drive slow, we drive careful," he says. "No rushing." Rushing causes mistakes, and mistakes in this cold mean dying. The drive back is tense. Visibility is perhaps 50 meters. Ice fog turning the world into a white void punctuated by the occasional ghostly larch. Gavril drives with his window cracked, listening to the engine, alert for any change in sound that might indicate trouble. You pass the memorial to his cousin, a reminder of what's at stake, and continue carefully through the frozen landscape. You make it back to Yakutsk as full darkness falls. The city lights, usually unremarkable, seem almost miraculous after hours in the remote village. The heated buildings, the working vehicles, the infrastructure supporting 300,000 people in this impossible place. All of it represents an enormous collective effort to make life possible where it shouldn't be. That night, you're last in Yakutsk before returning to whatever normal means in your previous life. Sardana opens a bottle of vodka, the good stuff she emphasizes, not the cheap fuel people use for cleaning engines. You toast to survival, to traditional knowledge, to the Yakut people who've thrived here for millennia. "You came here as a tourist," Sardana says. "You leave as someone who understands. Not the same as living here for decades, but enough to know what life here really means. You've learned the ash technique, not just how to do it, but why it matters. You've felt the cold try to kill you, and you've fought back successfully. You've seen the beauty and the harshness, the community and the isolation. You understand now why we stay. And the strange thing is, you do understand. Not intellectually, you understood that before you came. But viscerally, in your bones, in the muscle memory of preparing ash insoles, in the automatic way you now check the thermometer before dressing, in your newfound ability to read the quality of cold by how your breath behaves. You've touched something fundamental about human adaptability, about our species' ability to make home in the most unlikely places. The ash in the boots is more than a survival technique. It's a philosophy, the understanding that humans can thrive anywhere if we're smart enough, if we learn from those who came before, if we respect the environment rather than trying to dominate it. It's the recognition that sometimes the old ways are better than the new, that technology isn't always the answer, that wisdom accumulated over generations is worth preserving. You fall asleep for the last time in Sardana's apartment, listening to the building creak in the cold, the radiator hiss, the familiar sounds of life at -71 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you'll board a plane back to somewhere warmer, somewhere easier, somewhere that won't try to kill you if you forget your mittens. But part of you will stay here, in the cold, in the darkness, in the defiant human presence that says, "We belong here, we've always belonged here, and the cold will never drive us away." The Yakut people have survived at -71 degrees Celsius for thousands of years. They've done it not through brute force but through intelligence, community, adaptation, and the kind of accumulated knowledge that gets passed down in techniques like putting warm ash in your boots. It's elegant. It's effective. It's a testament to human ingenuity in the face of an environment that wants us dead. And somehow, against all odds and all reasonable expectations, it works. Life continues. People thrive. Children laugh. Communities flourish. All of it sustained by knowledge both ancient and modern, by technology both sophisticated and simple, by the ash in the boots and the determination in the heart. You came to learn about survival. You learned about life real, full, challenging, meaningful life in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. You learned that humans are capable of extraordinary things when necessity demands it. You learned that home isn't about ease or comfort, it's about belonging, about connection, about the land being in you and you being in the land. The cold teaches what matters. The ash in the boots reminds you that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. And the people of Yakutia, living and thriving at temperatures that kill the unprepared, prove that human beings are more resilient, more adaptable, and more remarkable than we usually give ourselves credit for. Sleep comes easily tonight, your body finally adapted to the rhythm of Yakutian life. Outside, the temperature drops to -73 degrees Celsius, the coldest of your visit. Inside, you're warm, safe, and profoundly changed by a week in the cold. Tomorrow you leave, but the knowledge stays, the respect stays, the understanding stays, and somewhere in your luggage, wrapped carefully, is a small container of birch ash. A reminder, a souvenir, a piece of ancient wisdom to carry with you back to the modern world. Just in case you ever need to keep your feet warm in impossible cold. Just in case the old knowledge becomes necessary again. The ash waits, patient and timeless, ready to serve as it has for thousands of years. And in that ash is the secret of human survival in extreme cold. Preparation, knowledge, respect, and the willingness to learn from those who survived what killed others. The lights outside Sardana's window are beginning to blur now, softening into gentle halos as your eyes grow heavy. The city of Yakutsk settles into its nightly rhythm, engines idling, chimneys breathing smoke into the frozen air, families safe in their elevated homes above the permafrost. Somewhere out there, a child is learning to prepare ash insoles from a grandmother who learned from her grandmother, the knowledge flowing forward through time like a quiet river beneath ice. You think drowsily about warmth, not the aggressive heat of the radiator beside you, but the gentle warmth of understanding, of connection, of having touched something essential about what it means to be human. The ash technique, so simple and so profound, becomes a metaphor drifting through your fading thoughts. We survive not by fighting what we cannot change, but by learning to work with it, to find elegant solutions that respect reality rather than deny it. The building creaks its familiar cold song, a lullaby of contracting metal and settling concrete. Your breathing slows, matching the patient rhythm of survival in extreme cold. Steady, measured, conserving energy for tomorrow. The temperature outside doesn't matter anymore. You're safe, you're warm, you're learning even in sleep what it means to belong to a place that demands everything and gives back the gift of clarity. Let your eyes close now. Let the cold world outside fade into abstraction. The ash sits warming for tomorrow. The knowledge settles into your bones, and the ancient wisdom of survival whispers that you are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to know. Sleep comes on soft, white wings, carrying you gently into dreams of snow and stars, and the quiet strength of people who chose to stay in the cold and, in staying, discovered what they were truly made of. Rest well, traveler. The cold has taught its lessons. Tomorrow brings new light,